This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to remind you about the curate's egg, which was famously, of course, good in parts. So the curate, I think it works like this. The curate would be the most junior member of the household, living with the vicar and his wife, which meant if there was an egg that looked vaguely suspect or smelt vaguely suspect, it would be more likely given to the curate. And you'd say to the curate, "How's your egg?" And the curate would reply, "Good in parts," which is obviously ridiculous because an egg is either rotten or not. And I think sometimes we forget that politicians are not curates' eggs. Politicians are a little bit more complicated than some of our analysis allows, particularly analysis driven by tribal loyalties. And I'm not sure we will ever live through a period of more entrenched tribal loyalty than the Brexit period, where people understandably decided that their feelings were more important than observable facts, and people who just presumed that observable facts would prevail got their noses very, very bloodied, blood that in many ways continues to flow. But I mean, first of all, if I said to you, how many prime ministers ago was Theresa May, and you had to answer now, what would you say? That too late. You'd have to count them in your head. You'd have to go, oh, flip, I forgot about Liz Truss. Well, I wish the markets could. So you're going back. Sunak, Truss, Johnson, May. Going back to 2016. And she has embarked upon a rehabilitation tour at the moment. Well, it's a book tour, and it's a book that I'm actually minded to at least have a look at, although I've been so immersed in political memoirs while writing my own latest that I might pause for a while before I get stuck in. And speaking of my own latest, my new book seeks to chronicle how we have been brought so low at this point in our shared history, how Britain was broken. In fact, that's what it's called, how they broke Britain. Theresa May barely features in it. I was thinking about this morning. She's I'd say she's a cameo role in how Britain was broken. Now, I tell you that, and obviously I'm not going to spend 20 minutes exploring the central thesis of the book, because you're going to think, well, she did this and she did that. What about the go-home vans and what about the hostile environment? Those were disgusting things that we will talk about this hour, but they were not elements of the decline and the diminishment that I'm exploring and describing in the book. So she's really just sort of the victim of Boris Johnson's machinations, and she's the target of something that often felt sexist, attacks from absolute wombats like Marc Francois, and she fell in thrall to the ERG, and she inexplicably had a bloke called Nick Timothy in a senior position in her office who possessed all of the intellectual acumen of a Spangle, and I liked Spangles. So there is nuance, is what I'm suggesting to you. I don't think there's much nuance with Boris Johnson, for example. You know, if you're going to be a member of the Boris Johnson fan club, you're a cult. You are a complete and utter cult. I don't think there's two ways about that. There never was, although it took a little longer for some people to see the scales fall from their eyes than it did others. You would struggle to justify any real warmth for him as a politician in terms of things done and things said, relationship with truth, integrity, accountability. Sunak, maybe a bit more nuanced. Not as nuanced as we thought he was when he came in. Truss, tricky. Too tricky for me to bother trying to explore it at all at the moment, because I want to draw your attention to Theresa May. Two things she said. We'll start with the first. Her Brexit. Can you even remember? Here's a really weird thing, right? I do this for a living, and as you may know, depending on whether you were listening at the time or not, I was pretty stuck into Brexit conversations. I mean, the more we talked about it, the more I realised what a terrible mistake we'd made, because whether you voted for it or not, nobody really knew what was going to happen. The great tragedy for our country was that the people who knew the least claimed to be the most knowledgeable and claimed to be the most certain about what was going to happen, and that's cheap food, easier trade, lower cost of living, energy would come down. The list is actually heartbreaking. I'm not going to bother going any further because it's too bleak. But even as someone who was stuck right into it, even as someone who was neck deep in it all, if you were charged to describe now the key differences between the deals or the final deal that Mrs. May failed to get through Parliament and the deal that Boris Johnson did get through Parliament, I'm not sure you could. If I were to say to you that if I were to say to you, just run us through now the difference between Theresa May's deal and Boris Johnson's deal. Just go on, just run us through it now. I'm not sure you could. I think you could do something like this. So we got our first entry in Idiot's Corner. If you love the European Union so much, why don't you go and live in it? Well, because you abolished my freedom of movement, you weapon. Crikey, some people are so stupid that light bends around them. Also dense, to be correct. The tricky, that's mad, right? If you think about the cauldron of British politics during that specific period, sort of culminating in the middle of 2019. You think about that and all of the oven-ready nonsense and all of the, world-beating gibberish. But if you think about how absolutely febrile politics was, and if you had to boil it down to the core of the conversation, it would be, what's the difference between the deal Theresa May tried to get through Parliament and the deal that Boris Johnson did get through Parliament? Can you even remember why Boris Johnson resigned as Foreign Secretary? What specific element of Theresa May's deal it was that he felt was untenable? This stuff's mad, by the way. I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit unfair to you and you can remember all of it. But it's really mad how completely detached from reality our country became during that period, and of course in many ways still is. Because the central part of Theresa May's deal that Boris Johnson felt he couldn't live with, to the point of summoning a photographer to the Foreign Office and resigning on camera, the central part of it was that the necessity of checks between Northern Ireland and Great Britain was unbearable. That was essentially the bit that he said he couldn't live with. Now think about the level of fraudulence involved in that now, in what he then did. And of course what he then did had to be undone by the Windsor framework, which solves some of the problems Boris Johnson and David Frost caused by signing up to exactly the thing that they both said they couldn't stomach when Theresa May offered it. That's crazy, right? We haven't had a conversation like this for a while. I hope we can explore some of these issues together in depth and intelligently. But can you? I mean, just think about that for a minute. Think about it if it was another country. And so what? You got rid of that Prime Minister because senior colleagues said they couldn't live with a thing. And then they did that exact thing after getting power and claimed it was brilliant. And half of the country went with them. And then the next guy who came in from the same party had to undo a lot of the stuff that they'd done in order to remove the stuff that they said they couldn't live with when it was the previous person that did it, but that they then introduced. Needs a bit of work, that description, doesn't it? It's a little bit convoluted. But that's where we are. And I don't know that I'm going to ask you a very complicated question today. We can dig into the weeds of the comparing deals if you want. You can challenge my analysis that it was the Northern Ireland element that Boris Johnson claimed was the thing he couldn't live with, and then he delivered something that was all of the things he said he couldn't live with. But that, I mean, you know, how interesting is it now in 2023 to have a conversation about Boris Johnson being uniquely dishonest, dissembling and disingenuous? It's a bit like talking about how, give me a ring and tell me how Catholic you think the Pope is. I don't see the point, really, in exploring or reminding ourselves of how absurd it was to let that man anywhere near power. But in terms of Theresa May, I'm kind of tempted just to ask you what your opinion of her is now, and whether it's changed since 2016, 2017, 2018 or 2019. Because I don't know. I don't know. She made some terrible, terrible mistakes, many of which seem to have come from the advice of this Nick Timothy bloke who inevitably ends up writing columns for The Telegraph, like David Frost, like Daniel Hannan. The stupider you are as a prominent Brexiter, the more guaranteed your place on the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph becomes. It's tragic to watch it unfold, especially as it's so obvious and so easy to see. But in terms of Theresa May, the unforgivable things she did would include the hostile environment and the go-home vans, and she did that before Brexit was a glint in Nigel Farage's eye. That was during her toxic period as Home Secretary. She alienated police. This I'll tell you what's annoying me. What's annoying me is her seeking to cast herself as some sort of avuncular maternal figure, more sinned against than sinning, a kind of British Merkel, if you like, someone who history should judge more kindly than it actually will. And the reason it annoys me is because I think on Brexit we should judge her a little bit more kindly than anybody else who tried to deliver it. But on almost every other element of her politics, this sort of attempt to appeal to a soft centre is hideous. The go-home vans alone just remain a scar upon British society. The hostile environment was a conscious decision. I spoke to Clive Myrie yesterday, and his own brother passed away without having secured his passport, came over from Jamaica. His parents had already settled here and just needed to prove, in his 50s or his 60s, needed to prove that he'd always lived here. That people from the Caribbean were sort of going through old school magazines, desperately hoping to find photographs of themselves singing in the choir so that they could prove to the Home Office that they were here in 1974. I don't think it's fully understood how disgusting that was. And that's a large part of the reason why watching Theresa May waltz around the studios at the moment, trying to cast herself as a woman more sinned against than sinning, is a little bit hard for me to swallow. But on Brexit, I think she probably deserves a fairly, a C+, a B. Let's get the phone lines open. 0345 6060973. I'll remind you what she said last night, or probably I'll play you for the first time what she said last night on Andrew Marr's magnificent radio programme. And then sometimes if I ask a really broad question, it doesn't work, because you like me to do all the heavy lifting in the morning and focus in on a really tight, laser-like question, which you can then have fun with. But I'm going to ask you politely to do some of the heavy lifting yourself today. I want quite a broad question. And if I said, how will history judge Theresa May? I'm asking you two questions, aren't I? I'm asking, how do you judge Theresa May as Prime Minister, chiefly, with a side order of Home Secretary? And then I'm asking, how do you think history will judge her? And they might be slightly different things, because I could never forgive her. I don't think I would ever forgive somebody for talking about citizens of nowhere and for creating the hostile environment and for presiding over Windrush and for all of the disgusting things she did that suggested she subscribes to a sort of Anglican exceptionalism, the idea that you wouldn't call her a racist, but she does think that people from a certain sort of background are just a little bit better than people from another sort of background. I think that's where the citizens of nowhere rhetoric comes from, and it's ugly, but it's not as ugly as what we've seen other Conservative politicians punt since, I suppose most obviously Braverman and Johnson and the rest of them. But that question there, how do you think history will judge Theresa May? 0345 6060973. And we're asking this question today because she's out there essentially asking history to judge her very kindly. Please, she's saying, judge me very kindly, history. In fact, I've written an entire book which could be construed as a plea to history to judge me kindly. Here she is last night with Andrew.
And I think the question is, did he recognise the impact this would have on Northern Ireland, or was he just so keen to get a deal and to be able to claim victory that he just accepted it?
And it was, in your view, not a good deal in the end. It was a bad deal.
It was a bad deal, I think, as we saw from all the problems we had on the Northern Ireland Protocol. And Rishi Sunak came in and, of course, agreed the Windsor Framework, which has eased that situation and in many ways resolved those issues. But we had that period of time when it was really very difficult for Northern Ireland and difficult for people, supermarkets and so forth in Great Britain who were sending food over to Northern Ireland, all the checks and stuff that came as a result of Boris's deal. So that's why, I think my deal would not have been in that position and would have been better.
And she's right, I think, but I wonder how big an element that will be of history's judgment, or at 18 minutes after 10 on Thursday morning, your judgment. Share it with me now.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10. The rehabilitation of Theresa May is underway. Are you going to buy it? Couple of phone lines free. 0345 6060 973 if you want to grab one of them. Ian Dunt, as ever in the Eye today, is very strong on the subject, picking particular holes in her claim that she sought to accommodate both sides in her Brexit work, sought to recognise the 48%. Well, I never felt recognised by Theresa May during that period, but looking back, I think that she probably played an almost impossible hand about as well as anybody could have done. 21 after 10 is the time. Loz is in Plymouth. Loz, what have you got?
Yeah, good morning, James. Just referring back to what Ian Dunter said, Mrs May didn't reach out to the Remainers, as she's trying now to profess that she did. She did not. She took it as 100% majority for leave and went down that avenue with the rest of the party.
Well, she didn't necessarily. To keep the Northern Ireland problem at bay, we were going to be in a customs union we were going to remain in the customs union, weren't we?
Well, yes. Yeah.
So that would have been much better than what we've ended up with. Certainly from an import-export point of view. What could she have done differently, Loz? I'm going to sound as if I'm defending her today when people ring in to attack her. I'm not. I'm being very rarely. I'm being a professional presenter and trying to explore
what she could have done, James.
Yes.
I mean, she campaigned for Remain herself.
Yes, she did, yeah.
So she could have said, I campaigned for Remain. I still think it was the best option to remain in the EU.
She couldn't have done that.
I know she couldn't because she was the Tory leader. So it was impossible. I get that, James.
But her job, she saw her job as delivering what the people had voted for. That's actually quite an honourable democratic position in which to find herself. I don't know if anyone heard me playing back. Someone just tweeted a clip of me already this morning on my phone. I pressed the wrong button on my phone and it sounds like I'm listening to my own clips in the studio while talking to Loz. Even I'm not that vain. But no, it was an honour. She was on a mission. She could not turn around and say, I wish we weren't doing it, but I'm going to give him my best shot. You're ignoring the atmosphere in which we live and in which we lived then. She'd have been torn to shreds by her own party and almost all of the media.
Well, yeah, okay, James, I'm going to concede that. But even so, I don't like this rhetoric that she's going about with.
You don't like the rehabilitation. You don't like the.
No, I don't like it, James. I don't like the fact that she's trying to say black is white, etc. when it wasn't. She delivered for the ERG. It's as simple as that. She didn't deliver for the British people. I
think you're right. Up to and including the point I've already made about the customs union. So the contortions that she undertook were imposed upon her by the headbangers who should never have been allowed anywhere near the seat of power. But some of them were in her own office, of course, as their burblings in the Daily Telegraph comment pages have subsequently proved. But I think the key question, as Loz has shown, is what could she have done differently? What could she have done differently? So the red lines, this is my interpretation and not not necessarily cold, hard, irrefutable fact. But the red lines were the red meat. Oh, I've never said that before. That's a nice little... Oh, it's too late for the book. Blast. The red lines were the red meat, right? So the red lines were, we're abolishing freedom of movement. Essentially, the minute you say we're coming out of the single market, then you're coming out of the four freedoms. So you're abolishing freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of money, freedom of movement of services, and crucially, freedom of movement of people. And the calculation, I think more imposed upon her, was that the abolition of the freedom of goods, the freedom of movement of goods, money, and services was a price worth paying in order to abolish the freedom of movement of people, including ourselves. There it is. That is, in a nutshell, the madness of Brexit. Theresa May's Brexit, Boris Johnson, anybody's Brexit. Abolishing the freedom of movement of goods, services and money is a small price to pay for abolishing our own freedom of movement across Europe and Europeans' freedom of movement into the UK. Absolutely tragic. She did that. She had to. If she hadn't done that, they probably would have chucked her out even sooner. And the next person to come in would have done it. One bit there you can debate, did she have to do it? But that's going to be the question with which I trip you up today. What could she have done differently? But the question that I am asking you, the overarching question is, how do you think history will judge Theresa May? John's in Stroud. John, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think history's going to judge her pretty poorly. I agree with the last caller. She could have gone for a much, much softer Brexit. And the fact that so soon after becoming Prime Minister, she stood up and made that speech where she put in the red lines with no question of argument, meant that she'd backed herself into a corner.
Well, if she hadn't pledged to abolish freedom of movement of people, she'd have been gone by tea time.
Would she, though?
Yes.
Because...
Yes, I'm certain of it. I can't prove it, but I'm absolutely certain of it.
Do you not think that she might have cobbled together enough votes, from across the party?
No, that's why she called the election in 2017, because she didn't have the strength to get what she wanted to get through Parliament, and that, of course, backfired horribly. But the central point about the red lines, the central point about the freedom of movement, and this is something that I've been writing about. You look at the environment, the anti-migration wolves that were pacing through the British media and the British political class. That there is no earthly way, having secured victory, that she couldn't abolish freedom of movement of people.
Yeah, I mean, you might be right, but
I'm not necessarily defending her, because she could have said, I want no part in this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. She could have stood. She portrays herself as an incredibly moral person.
She does,
she could have stood up for what was right.
Yes,
she could have said, "I've become leader. We're going to leave, but we need to remember that it was a very, very narrow margin of victory indeed, and we can't just go for an all-out, throw everything in the bin Brexit."
Well, here's what she said.
She did as well.
Say that again.
There's one other thing she did as well.
Go on.
At this time of this absolutely crucial time for our international relations, she made Boris Johnson Foreign Secretary.
Oh, all right. My devil's advocacy now is really flipping straining, but better inside the tent weeing out than outside the tent weeing in. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson being Boris Johnson, he was inside the tent weeing everywhere. Well, something else I could have put in the book. I'm hating this.
Metaphors and say he's inside the tent.
It's like a garden sprinkler. Yeah, sorry about that. It's not very pleasant at all.
It's not, but he was leaving deposits everywhere and marking his territory.
He was marking. That's beautifully put, John. He was, and of course we forget the damage he did to Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's case, and of course the questions that still hang over what the hell he was doing in Puglia, in the home of a KGB spy, or the family home, the home of a KGB family, the son of a KGB spy, sanctioned now by Canada and by Ukraine. And yet the son of the sanctioned man put in the House of Lords by Boris Johnson, reportedly against the advice of security services. You want a little mark of how broken Britain is. Johnson today is waving around claiming that Sunak and Biden aren't doing enough for Ukraine and he's the real friend of Ukraine. And he's the man who went straight from a NATO meeting in part about the Salisbury poisonings, went straight to the palazzo of the son of a KGB spy, the KGB spy in attendance. I just pause and think about that for just one single minute. And the media is so bent and craven now in this country that they're reporting Boris Johnson's comments on Ukraine as if they're news, without mentioning the fact that the bloke whose son he put in the House of Lords is now sanctioned by Ukraine, described as a member of Putin's inner circle by Canada, and facing the sort of sanctions that he will never face here, because if he ever did, questions would have to be asked about what the hell his son is doing sitting in the House of Lords. So that was Theresa May as well. But again, a devil's advocate hat on. It's not a great fit, I grant you, but her calculation was, I've got to keep him close. Keep your enemies close. That's what they say, isn't it? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So she kept Johnson close. The problem is she was behaving logically. And anyone who's ever approached Boris Johnson thinking that logic would be the way to manage the situation has ended up, let's just say regretting it. And that would include colleagues, party leaders, employers, wives, mistresses, you name it. Anybody who thought he would abide by and of course teachers back at Eton. Anybody who thought that he would ever abide by the what was it called? What did the master at Eton call it? The something that bind us all. The responsibilities that bind us all. It's not responsibilities, but that's what Theresa May was doing. I'll make him Foreign Secretary, and he'll have to abide by the codes that bind us all. Not Boris Johnson, mate. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33, Scott writes, unfortunately, Theresa May was a gateway to where we are now. She opened up the doors to the likes of Johnson and Sunak, popularising the language we see at the centre of the Tories' policies today. I completely agree with you, Scott. I think she loosened the lid upon a particularly pungent Pandora's box, and we're still a very long way from getting that lid back on. I'm not sure if you've mentioned this, says Ian in Huddersfield, but how about the Citizens of Nowhere speech? I think that's on the same theme, Ian, actually. She's totally complicit in where we are now as a country. She's just not as appalling as those who followed her. I think can we give her that? She's not quite as appalling as those who followed her. That could be her political epitaph. Tim in Hornsey disagrees. I'm a Labour man myself, but I have to say she was considerably more capable than any of the other Tory clowns. I think she was a good statesperson and should get some credit for her handling of Brexit. Mate, it failed, her handling of Brexit, but I understand the point you make. I think history will remember her as a mediocre leader amongst a grouping of the worst leaders this country has ever had. And Nikki in Kent says, you're being too soft on Theresa May. I'm not. I'm being the devil's advocate. I think she's grim. Her thoughtless and insulting comments towards EU migrants whipped up xenophobia and worse. She said such things that EU nationals are citizens of nowhere, and her Brexit deal would stop them jumping the queue. She dehumanised my Italian husband, and I will never forgive her. I'm glad we've got that there for balance. Jacob is in St Albans, although probably not that Jacob. Jacob, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I've always wanted this.
Thank you.
And Theresa May actually started all of this, because I'm going to say something now that no one else seems to be talking about.
Go on.
It was during Theresa May's watch that the Windrush episode happened. It's just that someone else had to take it for it, because she was now the Prime Minister.
Yes.
She actually did it. And if you could do a program on that I think many people will appreciate it.
Of course, and I must. You're right. I mean, I did mention it, and we talk a little in this. I don't know if it's this week or next week's Full Disclosure with Clive Myrie, whose parents came over from Jamaica, but whose brothers were absolutely caught up in the worst.
Yes, people died while they were waiting for their case to be heard.
Well,
that is a serious thing, and she just called them collateral damage. That's what I think.
Clive's brother did actually pass away in exactly those circumstances. It's a very powerful bit of his new book. Did she use the phrase collateral damage, or is that your phrase?
No, that's my phrase, because if you don't care who you step on your way to wherever you want to be, it's because you consider them as, not that important.
There's a glossing, isn't there? I mean, this is what I meant at the beginning when I talked about it not being binary, good or bad, but there is a glossing over a lot of the bad stuff in the way that this book is being greeted, and I don't know how much detail she goes into, if any, on how Windrush happened, but it does have her fingerprints all over it. And of course, it remains a scandal. It remains an unresolved scandal. People remain appallingly treated. Yeah,
and Boris, she opened the door for Boris, and Boris took it to the next level.
Yeah,
good old Boris.
Yeah, I hear you, Jacob. It is, easy to say, well, you keep your enemies closer, but if your enemy is someone as toxic as him, then you should really be, I don't know, building an enormous tower with no steps and sticking him at the top of it. Thank you, Jacob. 10:37 is the time. That Windrush element of her legacy is perhaps the ugliest, actually. Perhaps the ugliest. And that notion that, how could it have happened? So, I mean, even now, most of us don't properly understand, but uniquely for an empire, the colonies, particularly in this case, we're talking about the West Indies, we're talking about the Caribbean, people there believed, because this was the legal situation, that their citizenship of the empire was equivalent to ours, to people born and growing up here. So when the Windrush generation came over, they came over in full expectation of equality. If you want to read something beautiful about this, read Andrea Levy's Small Island. But it's so important to remember this. People came over in full expectation of full equality. And obviously they didn't get it. Socially, they didn't get it. Legally, they didn't get it. Exclusion from boarding houses, exclusion from jobs, being turned away from that. No dogs, no blacks, no Irish. It's a familiar refrain. It's a real one. It existed. But then the subtler denials of equality. So you're struggling with the social inequality. And then you struggle with an almost constitutional inequality when it comes to the things that you were still allowed to do legally. But what was most remarkable about Windrush was the children and grandchildren being rendered unequal as well. What would happen if you or Jacob Rees-Mogg were required to prove that they had been in this country since 1973, say, and that they had never left it for a significant amount of time? Well, if you were ordered to prove on pain of removal that you had a right to be in the only country you'd ever known, the only home you'd never known, and because you'd never left it, you didn't have a passport. That is the legacy of Windrush that will never be erased, however much it is ignored and sidelined and glossed over by its architects, including Theresa May and presumably Nick Timothy. That bit there, asking men and women, grown men and women, parents, grandparents themselves, to prove that they had a right to be here. That's absolutely disgusting. And that's on her. That's on her. Alison is in Bury St Edmunds. Alison, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Lovely to talk to you again.
Likewise.
Regarding Theresa May, I mean, if we leave all the things she's done bad to one side and just concentrate on the Brexit deal.
Yes.
Because I think, like on the Windrush stuff and all that, yes, she should be, looked at harshly. With the Brexit deal, because a lot of people, me included, think it was better than Boris's, I think she will still be looked at harshly, but she needs to begin a little bit of slack.
So in that window, which in the ludicrous cauldron of British politics currently still looks like the most important bit, the Brexit bit. It won't be, and it certainly wouldn't be if you were a Windrush family. But in that little window of her premiership, you would argue she probably did as well as she could have done.
Yeah, I've always thought that the reason she was no longer Prime Minister is, A, because she was bullied during the Brexit deal, because it was still predominantly a male environment, and C, they wanted Boris, because Boris, to a lot of especially the Red Wall votes, he's the chap who, you can take down the pub, have a good laugh with, a bit like Nigel Farage, always drinks pints. I don't want that sort of Prime Minister. I don't want somebody who I can go and have 10 pints. Not that I drink 10 pints, but you see where I'm coming from. I want somebody who, doesn't just want to be my friend. I want somebody who, because like as a manager, people always say to you, well, you can't be, I'm no longer your friend, I'm your manager. Or, mums and dads, I'm your mum, I'm your dad, I'm not your friend. I can be friendly to you. And do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes, I do. Exactly. I mean, up to a point, I think that you can be perfectly affable and wonderful company and still be an effective politician. Just the two you cited are despicable individuals who wouldn't know the truth if it sat on their heads. But they convey this clubbable kind of personality that many people fall for. I think that's true. And May, I don't know that May doesn't. You're quite right. May took the job with a sense of duty and even in her own mind a sense of honour. But I think of the politicians we never talk about anymore who actually sacrificed their political careers in a desperate and failed attempt to stop the madness. And she certainly doesn't. She doesn't deserve to be on the same page as them, does she?
No, exactly. And I think it was all done. It was all personality. Because if you look back at some of the things where she did publicly, when she did look very awkward. She did look very kind of embarrassed. So I think she was outed because of her personality and not because of what she actually maybe did or didn't do. And they wanted Boris in, and I think that it just went from bad to worse.
Well, you're not going to lose any points for describing it as going from bad to worse, but it was, of course, driven by people who thought it would get better, these unspecified sunlit uplands that we used to hear so much about. That line specifically, if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. That, I think, probably is what you'd put above the door. Because that was just gross. And as Ian Dunt puts it in the Eye today, she'd taken UKIP's nativist worldview and absorbed it into what had until then been a centre-right Conservative party. And on the question of compromise or leadership, I know some people ask, this is at the 2016 Tory conference, I know some people ask about the trade-off between controlling immigration and trading with Europe. But that is the wrong way of looking at things. We will decide for ourselves how we control immigration. So that's the point that I made to you earlier about considering it worth paying the price of abolishing free movement of goods, free movement of money and free movement of services in order to abolish the freedom of movement of everybody in the EU, including ourselves. And of course, the only freedom of movement we abolish for everybody else in the EU is the freedom to come here. They can still travel freely to 27 or more other countries, whereas we can travel freely to Ireland and back. It's I'm going to play you that little bit now from a select committee a couple of years later when it appears that she wasn't entirely clear. This is a little bit like the Rwanda conversations that you hear people like Ian Duncan Smith having, and live on the radio or live on the television they realised that the scheme would actually mean that bona fide refugees who had, for example, been helping British troops in Afghanistan will have their application processed in Rwanda, and when it is successful they'll stay in Rwanda for the rest of their life. That's the scheme. And a lot of Tory politicians who thought they supported the scheme didn't understand it. Here's Theresa May, very interestingly, on that question of freedom of movement.
So what we do to European Union nationals, they will do to us. So that means that people with low skills from the United Kingdom, young people at the beginning of their careers, will equally not be allowed the same rights of access to the European Union.
No, well, first of all, you've jumped to an assumption there. What I was talking about was the immigration system that will be independently put into place by the United Kingdom government.
Is Europe will do to us what we do to them.
Well, you're making an assumption. I have to say, I don't think that
so you're expecting young Brits to go abroad as they have just now.
Well, we've been looking at a variety of issues in relation to young people particularly. One of the areas that we've looked at is the sort of programmes such as Erasmus, which have enabled the students to take advantage of membership of the European Union. But if you look at the section within the political declaration, you will see that, of course, we will be looking at the mobility arrangements that are in any trade.
It's the case, Prime Minister, that the rights that you and I had to live, work and love across a continent of 28 nations is going to be deprived to our young people because of your obsession with immigration.
No, and I refer you to Article 53. The parties agree to consider conditions for entry and stay for purposes such as research, study, training and youth exchanges.
So you're not ending freedom of movement then?
Yes, we are ending freedom of movement. We are ending freedom. What freedom of movement gives automatic rights to people living in the European Union that are not available to people outside the European Union. In future, we will end that automatic right that comes with free movement. What we will put in place is our system of immigration rules, which will apply across all countries, and it will be skills-based rather than based on the country that somebody comes from.
My Lord, that's absolutely extraordinary. I thought I'd mined this shaft to exhaustion. I thought I'd got all the clips. You remember when I used to do it, almost like Fluff Freeman doing the hit parade on a Saturday afternoon? I'd play this and I'd da-da-da-da-da-da, and I don't think I've ever heard that one before. You'd play Mimford admitting that we were going to be screwing up agriculture and manufacturing forever. You'd play out clips of Rees-Mogg clearly not understanding anything. You'd play out clips of David Davis clearly not understanding anything. There's a recurring theme here. You'd play out clips of Nadine Dorries clearly not understanding anything. I don't think I've heard that one before. Theresa May essentially revealing that she thought she could abolish freedom of movement for everyone else, but kind of keep it for us. Whoa, well, that goes in the case for the prosecution, doesn't it?
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
A lot of you reeling like me from that clip. I'm so sorry that I never spotted it sooner. I think it's November 2018. So right in the thick of it, if you pardon the pun. And Theresa May demonstrating, shall we say, an overly optimistic grasp of what was likely to happen in the context of abolishing freedom of movement. And again, another reminder of how, I mean, what is the maddest phrase from that era? Let's go WTO, probably, because you really had to have gammon for brains to even begin formulating that thought. Let's go WTO. A no deal is better than a bad deal? See, May went there. Whether she meant it or not, I don't know. I think it's reasonable to suggest that she may have been politicking, and she knew full well that no deal would never be better than a bad deal, because the only deal you're ever going to get from the point of view of what you had before was a bad deal. What was the single worst phrase from that era? No deal is better than a bad deal. Let's go WTO. I don't know. But that clip was chilling. 10:52 is the time. Lynn is in Westminster, which normally means it's Baroness Lynn Featherstone, former member of... Oh, it is. It would have been a small coincidence if it was a different Lynn in Westminster. What would you like to say?
Well, I phoned in because I was the only Lib Dem in the Home Office in the first 2 years of the coalition, which I hasten to add was before hostile environment, which I thought Scott was absolutely right. I think that opened the door to everything that followed. Yes. I'm not here to defend Theresa May, but I do have some personal experience of some of her better points.
Good.
And although the world seems to think that David Cameron was responsible for same-sex marriage, actually I was the minister who put it forward, suggested it. I was the originator and architect of the law based on years of campaigning by LGBT people who actually fought.
Yes.
But what people don't know is that when you bring new policy into government, I didn't know this either, you have the Prime Minister has to do a right round. And in order for... It wasn't in the coalition agreement, it wasn't in the manifestos, and I had to get it through Theresa May.
Okay.
And she never talks about it. I've got no idea why. It's in my book, as you plug your book.
There's no plug away, Lynn. Plug away.
Equal ever after. But she wrote round for me, and she got the approval of David Cameron to go ahead, for me to go ahead with same-sex marriage. And I don't think a lot of people know that. And
I'm glad that you are reminding us of some of the more positive achievements of Theresa. But you're doing it
against the bad. Though,
no, I know, but you are doing it through the lens of your own perhaps unfairly overlooked role in history.
No, but let me just add two other little good things she did. She authorised 2 inquiries. One was Hillsborough, and one was the contaminated blood scandal, where the government knew it was given poisoned blood and killed nearly 4,000 people, I think. And the families involved in that, it doesn't affect everyone, and people probably let it pass by. But for people involved in it, and my own sister's son died in the contaminated blood scandal. I had nothing with her doing it.
Sure.
So, those things matter a lot to those people. And I think her biggest mistake with this book is to call it abuse of power.
Yes.
I think the title opens her to everything that everyone is saying this morning, because hostile environment and everything that followed. The only thing I would say, you can't be in the Conservative Party unless you hate immigrants. I mean, it's your badge of office. It's how you get promotion.
It is now.
How you declare your love.
It is now. It wasn't.
It was then. And yes, Nick Timothy was obviously behind that. You're right. Absolutely.
Cameron spoke, for all his myriad faults, Cameron spoke quite persuasively about refugees in particular, if not immigration in general. He was a very, very different, singing from a very, very different hymn sheet from the one that they've all got now, every single one of them.
Yeah, no, you're right. It has become far more fulsome. And now you couldn't be in the Conservative Party if you didn't hate immigrants. But,
no, you couldn't.
But she took it and she went with it. And, for that, she's guilty.
Do we know why she's called it the abuse of power? I haven't read it yet.
No, I haven't read it yet.
I bet you've checked the index, haven't you? I bet you've checked the index.
I have not.
You little liar. I bet you have.
That's defamatory because I haven't.
I take it back immediately. I will. I'll check it for you. It's the first thing I do when books come into the office is check.
No, I hadn't even thought like that. Listen, there's a lot of other things. I'm no longer in that madness.
Do we know why she's called it that, though? Do we know what it specifically refers to?
I think because she has a sense of justice, and she feels that she went where no one went on some issues, and she probably wants to have her voice there saying, look, I wasn't all bad. Look at these things that I fought for. And, she, obviously very runs deep. I think you were right to refer to her religious upbringing, because I think that runs very, very deep with her. And that sense of being a good person. And she probably hates being coloured or tarnished with all of these things like the hostile environment and everything.
But they're on her, though, aren't they? They are on her. So what the blurb says is that she confronted a series of issues in which the abuse of power led to devastating results for individuals and significantly damaged the reputation of and trust in public institutions. And she cites Hillsborough, Grenfell, the Daniel Morgan case, and other parliamentary scandals.
Contaminated blood, yeah. So that's her. I think her justification is she went into fight on those things. Probably didn't want to mention all the other things.
Well, no, there it is, and you know that's what memoirs are, really, isn't it? Unless you're Rory Stewart, actually, which is close to self-flagellating at times. Lynn, thank you very much, Baroness Featherstone. 10:58 is the time. Adrian is in Watford. Adrian, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Nice to talk to you, mate.
Likewise.
James, I was a police officer employed by Hertfordshire Police in 2016 when Theresa May was Home Secretary.
Yes.
Geographically, I was based at Watford, and we had custody suites in South Oxley, Rickmansworth, Hemel Hempstead, so we could take a lot of prisoners. She closed all the custody suites down. We ended up having to, if we arrested a shoplifter, which are a massive topic at the moment, we would have to take them to Hatfield Police Station, which is an hour away. We'd be off shift for half the shift. Okay.
Yes.
So she's got a lot to answer for.
And this is the stuff that the public probably don't know because they're getting their news from the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Express, or the Sun.
Exactly. But I mean, when all the custody suites closed, they started giving us £200 fixed penalties that we could give shoplifters. So we'd go to a shoplifter in whatever store it would be, and if they passed the test of having no previous convictions, we would give them a £200 fixed penalty. If they didn't pass the test, then we'd take them all the way to Hatfield. It was a joke.
And also the idea of taking 200 quid from someone who's nicking razor blades to flog down the pub is a little bit optimistic, isn't it?
Exactly.
And she gave the speech saying that making cuts to the service wouldn't have an impact upon your ability to pursue criminals, your ability to solve crimes, which was, I mean, even from 7 years later, it's a breathtaking act of madness.
She massively cut the police force. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She closed
under orders. She closed police stations. She cut the 20,000, I think, and then now they're making a song and dance about bringing them back. But of course, what we're getting is new recruits in place of
who have no experience.
There it is. Experienced, proper officers.
You could join the police now at 17 or 18 and go straight in as a detective constable. When I was 17 or 18, I joined the army. I got experience, then I joined the police.
Yes.
And back in those days, if you were 18 and tried to join the police, they said, go away and get some experience. But now they're letting them in. The non-experienced guys are coming in now, and women.
And through necessity, not even through ideology or policy, just because they have so many vacancies that they need to fill. That I've heard, I'm sure you have as well, on the grapevine and the chat rooms, but some worrying tales of just how low the bar is for new recruits, to the point of genuinely believing that might be a scandal currently in incubation that will break in the coming years. We shall see. Adrian, thank you. It is 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11, there was a famous headline of Tony Blair, actually. I forget precisely when, after he came out of Downing Street, possibly 2011. History will be my judge, he said. It's never really true, though, is it? Because history is, of course, written by the victors. But Theresa May is in history will be my judge territory at the moment. And, the verdict on this programme, at least, was far from friendly, far from warm. And I guess you need a little bit of delusion, don't you? Just to sort of get out of bed every day if you're living in that kind of crucible. But I find my attitude to her is even less forgiving than it was at 10 o'clock this morning. But thank you. There were some excellent calls there. If you missed it, if you're just tuning in, worth rewinding, actually, having a listen, or maybe wait till I've finished. It's Mystery Hour at 12. It's Thursday. This week's gone quickly, hasn't it? Is it just me? I've had so much on, that's probably why. Do you know, I've done 2 podcasts. I've got Gabby Logan and Clive Myrie coming up for you. I'm doing another one on Friday. I'm recording Amir Khan, which I'm looking forward to. Finished recording my audio book. I think today, and I've got a thing today, a commercial thing. I'm too busy, man. This is ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, on with the day job. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. Do you remember, of course you do, it was only on Monday, The astonishing revelations regarding the sexual harassment and even assault that female surgeons reported they had suffered at the hands of colleagues. I touched yesterday upon a letter to the Times, which, I mean, I don't know what word to use here. A letter to the Times which stopped me in my tracks, right? And remember, I'm a bloke. I read this letter twice. It sat on the letters pages among letters expressing opinions that you would describe as civilised and sympathetic. So the consensus response, by far the most popular and common response to news that female surgeons were routinely in receipt of appalling conduct from male colleagues, both verbal, emotional and physical. A third of female surgeons had been sexually assaulted by colleagues in the past 5 years. A minor trigger alert here. I'll just remind you of some of the things that we heard about on Monday's programme, including from surgeons who had contributed to the original research. The one that stands out for me was that, because what was brought home to me was the physical proximity of the operating theatre, because most of us have only ever been in an operating theatre under anaesthetic, so we're not really paying that much attention to what's going on around us. Don't text me to talk about local anaesthetics. I'm just sort of trying to think why I've only been in an operating theatre once, and I was out cold. But when you see it on the telly, or indeed when you imagine it, I mean, it's like chefs around a pot. It's as if you've got, 4 or 5 people and you need to pass the scalpel, the proximity. So that was part of it. That was part of what I hadn't fully understood. And it was the caller who rang in to tell us that she was working with a senior surgeon who would turn away from the operation to mop his brow, but he decided that the best place to mop his brow would be his colleague's cleavage. So he was rubbing his forehead across her breasts, albeit that she's in surgical gowns. And then when she said, "Would you like a towel?" he said, "No, this is much more fun." So that sort of thing that would, in the 1970s, would have possibly featured in a Carry On film. Do you think that sort of behaviour? And I want to make that point clear, because I want to recognise that the world changes and that people doing things now that are unacceptable are different from people doing things then that were unacceptable. They were always unacceptable, however, they were once accepted. And the nature of culture is such, the nature of society is such, that it normalises things. So I don't think, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that in one of the Carry On Doctor films or one of the Doctor at Large films, James Robertson more likely Sid James, playing a surgeon, would have used Barbara Windsor's breasts to mop his brow and then cackled about it in characteristic fashion. But that was the 1970s. It's now, the second decade of the 21st century. Pains me to recognise this, given my own age, but it's 50 years ago. Or thereabouts. And then he's a pal of mine. I think he's a wonderful actor. It's great to see him in that wonderful detective series set in Malta. But Robin Asquith's films obviously spoke to an era that is a million miles away from where we are now. And this is explanation, not excuse. It's context, all right? So some of the other stuff that went on would never have been acceptable. It would never be. But I just want to sort of set that up before I tell you about this letter that was published in the Times yesterday. He wrote, "Sir," someone called Dr. Peter Hilton, a consultant anaesthetist and intensivist from 1986 to 2020. He wrote, "Sir," and remember, some of the surgeons were coming forward with tales of actual rape. I don't think I need to add anything to that, do I? "This snowflake generation of young doctors, largely female and selected on mainly academic excellence, clearly did not do their homework. Medical training and practice is brutal and demanding, with long hours, and bullying happens. Sexually inappropriate comments and actions do occur. It is stressful. All I can say is that if they want to make a success of this rewarding career, then they should toughen up. Perhaps the 4 A stars at A-level are not the answer to all the problems they will face. And thus writes someone who, despite being in the autumn of his years, is clearly still smarting about getting rubbish exam results and yet somehow managing to get himself into medical school, it seems to me. I read that twice yesterday, and I wanted to do it on the show, actually, but because we'd done the original story the day before, and we wouldn't really have been adding anything to it, I didn't do it yesterday. We had lots of other interesting things to talk about yesterday. But the other reason why I didn't talk to you about it yesterday, or more pertinently invite you to talk to me about it yesterday, third decade of the 21st century. Thank you, Anthony. I am a muppet. I think that's been established on many occasions in the past, but there's nothing as invigorating as my inbox to keep me honest. We haven't had anyone in Idiot's Corner today. That could be me, couldn't it? I might have to put myself briefly in Idiot's Corner for saying we were in the second decade of the 21st century when it is, of course, the third. But the other reason why I didn't talk about Dr. Peter Hilton yesterday was that I presumed he would repent. What I thought had happened was that this fellow was sitting at his breakfast table, eating a grapefruit and reading the Times, in this case, and reading this story, and he suffered a sort of rush of blood to the head and decided that he would fire off a pungent missive to the Times. And this is one of the problems with emails. You know, they don't leave you any time to reflect. You press send straight away. Here's some wonderful advice for you that I've benefited from myself on countless occasions. If you are writing an angry email, sleep on it. Right? Write it, get it all out of your system, and then sleep on it. You could say the same for tweets, actually. If you're firing off something really, really pungent, really cross, sleep on it. And then the next morning read it and decide whether actually you want to send that at all, because you might not. So this fella clearly didn't sleep on it, and he wrote what he wrote. And I think I thought yesterday he must have written it from a position of, unhinged crossness, for want of a better phrase. So we didn't do it on yesterday's show. Well, the Times rang him last night to presumably check whether or not what I thought might have happened had happened. The Times rang him to sort of go, well, I just wonder. Yeah, I mean, obviously it got a lot of pickup. It got a lot of traction. A lot of doctors, female surgeons, and people in general queuing up to condemn him. Dr. Liz O'Riordan wrote that it proves that sexual harassment is still accepted by the men who train and work with us, and outlines how much work we still have to do. And I'm not sure you can argue with that. Dr. Rhiannon Darcy, a specialty registrar in public health medicine, said Dr. Hilton has inadvertently provided the perfect exemplar of why issues such as these prevail. I mean, they're just right, aren't they? The letter is literally proof that these attitudes are still commonplace, that these attitudes are still permitted, not just permitted, but and not just tolerated, but defended. There's the word, finally. Defended by men. And he's only 71, so, he only retired 3 years ago. So the Times rang him up, and he didn't express horror at what he'd done. He didn't go, oh my days, well, there's a lesson for us all. Don't press send until you've had time to reflect upon what you've written. I also thought, and I don't know whether this is, whether this makes me old-fashioned, I also thought if he's married to a woman, then he would have sent it without telling her, and when she saw it, she would have bitten his head off. I think possibly there I'm projecting, but I just thought it possible that he'd write this letter and there'd be a bit of a fuss, and he'd go, oh, darling, there's something I should probably tell you. I wrote a letter to the Times yesterday, and it's caused a bit of a brouhaha. And then Mrs. Hilton goes, well, what have you done now? And he tells her about the letter, and she goes, well, you better bloody apologise immediately. That's absolutely ridiculous. You're defending sexual harassment. So the Times rang him up last night to find out what he thought about things, and he essentially stood by his letter and claimed that his views were shared by many other doctors. He said that allegations of criminality should be investigated, but added, from what I've seen, most of it is trivial. The important thing in medicine is the patient on the operating table. He worked at the Morriston Hospital in Swansea and insisted that sexual comments and jokes were commonplace in operating theatres, which is clearly true. The difference is that the women who contributed to this research found it abominable, and he found it funny or enjoyable. Everyone's corrected me today. You're right, Vinny. We did put someone in Idiot's Corner already. It was the bloke telling me to go and live in the EU without realising that he'd robbed me of the right to do so, or kind of robbed me of the right to do so. Thank goodness for Irish heritage. 15 minutes after 11. Back to Dr. Peter Hilton. A spokeswoman for Swansea Bay University Health Board said, Dr. Peter Hilton no longer works for our organisation and his views do not reflect our values. So, here's a scandal about sexual assault and sexual harassment being absolutely endemic in British operating theatres. And here's a bloke so completely certain, and this is what interests me this hour. Here's a bloke so completely certain that it's all a big fuss about nothing, that he writes to the Times about it under his own name. This is not the same as being Billy Bunchernumbers on Twitter saying that women these days, you can't even tell them they look nice without being arrested for sexual assault. This is not the same as quietly thinking to yourself, good Lord, things have gone far too far. These days you probably can't pinch a bottom anymore without getting your collar felt. And privately saying that, or even with, quotes, the lads, engaging in banter, which if your female partner heard it, she'd give you your sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap. That's the point that I find close to baffling about this, is that he's so certain that a story about a third of female surgeons being sexually assaulted by colleagues in the past 5 years is a fuss about nothing, that he's written to the Times about it. And I've got 2 questions for you. The first is, and I'm 51, so I'm only 20 years younger than this bloke. But my God, those 20 years seem crucial, don't they? Those 20, a lot has happened in those 20 years. But actually, I've got more than 2 questions as usual, but I'll start with the 2 most obvious. How does he end up there at 71? All right? Not 201. He's 71. He's lived through the last 20 years. For most of them, for 17 of them, he was in post. He was in the job. How does Dr. Peter Hilton end up reading about colleagues, female colleagues, being sexually assaulted by male colleagues in precisely the context that he worked in for his entire professional career and arrive at the conclusion that it's a big song and dance about nothing? How does he end up there? All right, think about it and then tell me. 0345 6060 973. Is the number that you need, okay? How does he end up there? Question number 1. And question number 2 is, what's it like dealing with something like this? What is it like? And I don't know that men will have much, if any, experience of this. What is it like being told? Because do you know what the maddest thing is? The maddest thing is that for generations, women who were being told it was no big deal, and I need your help with this, kind of ended up almost trying to convince themselves that it was, is that right, that it was no big deal? So if you're in the same generation as Dr. Peter Hilton, you're thinking, God, lots of stuff that happened to me shouldn't have happened, but there was nothing I could do back then because the world was full of Peter Hiltons. So question number 1 is, how did he end up in a place like this? You've worked with people like this, you know them, you might be married to one. What's it like? 0345 6060 973. And then question number 2 is, what's it like to be the victim of something grim and then to be told by another man or woman, I suppose, not necessarily the one that did it, that it's no big deal? Something that you found deeply unpleasant, somebody else can sit in judgment on and tell you that it's no big deal. And if it was HR that did it or personnel, then that becomes even more pertinent, I think, and even more shocking. So if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. How do you end up holding views like that when you only retired 3 years ago? And what's it like to be told that what you suffered was no big deal? It's 11:19.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 11. Anne in Chorley writes, some women are complicit with the kind of thinking of Peter Hilton, James, especially if they're married to them. His wife is, if he has one, I don't know if he has one, he may have lost her. I mean, who knows? Be careful. I opened that speculation, so I'm not criticising you, Anne. His wife is probably totally on board with it. Alan asks, is he defending his own past actions to avoid cognitive dissonance? That's a nice thought. Greg in Liverpool, am I the only one who, when meeting surgeons and indeed some doctors, especially of the old school, feels some of them have a God complex, which one could only put down to narcissism or a form of corporate psychopathy. Kind of talked about that on Monday, actually, when we were discussing the issues that Dr. Peter Hilton decided to write to the Times to diminish or almost even poo-poo. And Kevin in Stirling writes, Hilton's letter is another case of privilege clinging on to relevance and status by diminishing what the rest of us know to be unjust. Beautifully put, Kevin. And he adds, I napped on this before I sent it. Must have been a very brief nap, like 2 winks as opposed to 40. And Dan asks what a lot of you are asking. It really makes you wonder what this guy got up to when he was in the job. Indeed it does. Zara is in Liverpool. Zara, what made you pick up the phone?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Zara.
First-time caller here. I'm a nurse myself. I've worked in the NHS for the last 30 years.
Well, you didn't grow up in Liverpool, did you, Zara?
No, not at all.
Carry on.
But as I was saying to, obviously, the previous person I spoke
Yes.
to, they're allowed to get away with this. So I've worked at the Trust where Mr. Ian Patterson worked,
Yes.
the disgraced breast surgeon, and also Mr. Simon Bramall, the disgraced liver surgeon, who branded his initials
Yes.
into people's livers.
Yes.
They're allowed to get away with it. Everybody knew. We knew what was going on, but nobody felt that they could report it or it was taken seriously
Why
at
not?
all.
Why not?
Because you just have this culture with the NHS. I've just listened, obviously, to what you said about the narcissism, and it does literally feel like that. There are a lot of consultants who are bullies. I've been bullied myself by consultants. I work in critical care as well. I was actually sexually assaulted in a patient's cubicle once by a senior doctor myself. So, as I say, there's no reporting culture, it's a complete blind culture within the NHS.
So in a sense then, and I'd phrase this carefully, in a sense he's right, because something else he told the Times is this: I'm not the only one of my generation that feels like this. I've sent the letter to colleagues I worked with and they agree wholeheartedly. Medicine is not alone in having a culture of bullying, sexual abuse, verbal or otherwise, and banter that's in bad taste. The reality is that it's bloody hard work and it takes a lot of time to train and it's demanding. So what do men like him then think of the men who aren't engaging in this sort of behaviour?
I can only assume that they, for want of a better turn of phrase, that they're probably a bit of a puff or whatever, and they don't want to engage in it. It's just not. That's just not the case at all. As I say, it does go on. It goes on to this day. I can, as I say, I still work in critical care, and it goes on.
And you don't feel that there's anything you can do about it? It must be getting better, I think. Is it a bit, I hope?
Yeah, it's got better. It has got better. But as I say, largely, you've got consultants, as I say, like, their ego is
they think they're God, and they think they're God. And the mistake is that everybody around them agrees, or at least behaves as if they do agree. I tell you what, actually, Zara, the quotes on the online version of the story, I've only got the print version, but online, when I see young girls leaping up and down with A-star grades and getting into medical school, my heart sinks because they haven't got a clue what medicine is about. Man, there's some stuff. This is a therapist's dream, this fella. He insisted he was not condoning sexual harassment and said allegations of criminality should be investigated. Ask about the figures showing that 1 in 3 surgeons have been sexually assaulted, female surgeons. He said, well, from what I've seen, most of it is trivial. The important thing in medicine is the patient on the operating table. So you go to someone and you say, I've been sexually assaulted. And a 71-year-old man says, well, that's trivial. And Zara says that's normal. In fact, the least shocked people on Monday and I imagine today will be the people in surgical environments, surgical settings. Sarah's in Westminster. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Well, just that you were saying you can't, because you're a man, you don't know what it feels like, which I agree, you can't.
I'm just going to try and sort that phone line out, Sarah, and hopefully come back to you shortly, because it's obviously an important subject. 27 minutes after 11. Alex is in Burton. Alex, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello.
I'm just calling from my experience. I know I don't work in the NHS, but something similar. I've just
the question, just to clarify, the question is not just about NHS settings.
Yeah,
not
well,
at all.
Anything.
Yes, it's about men like this, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've just come out from working in a secondary school, actually, and throughout my 3.5 years there, it was just absolutely nothing but hell. I had PE teachers saying to me, when I was walking to work one time, him and another PE teacher drove past in the car and shouted out the window and called me a slag.
Right.
And I went into work, and when I told work, they said, it's just them, it's just the PE teachers, just ignore them. You know, it's acceptable. They're the male young PE teachers. They kind of say what they want, do what they want. And actually, you know, years went by, just little things carried on. You know, I had a class full of boys in a PE lesson because I was supporting one of the students in there.
Yes.
And the PE teacher was like, can you lie down on the bench and show the boys how to do a bench press? You know, in front of a whole class of boys. And I think even the students, they were like, miss, are you sure you're okay?
And you're not a PE teacher. You're not a PE teacher.
I was a teaching assistant.
Yes.
And this carried on. And then a couple of months ago, obviously a student had made a safeguarding, you know, allegation to me.
Right.
And I reported this, and it was to do with a PE teacher. And the next thing I know, the head teacher's got me in the vice principal, or the principal's got me in her office shouting at me, saying, it makes me question what kind of conversations you're instigating with these students to make these allegations.
Oh, God.
And then the next thing I know, I get put on gardening leave the next day, and it's like they're trying to cover up, and it's just these men are protected in these environments, because...
Yeah, go on, sorry.
Sorry.
No, you go on.
Either because of their reputation, or they've got a big following in the community, they're young, you know.
It's institutional protection as well, so the vice principal there is thinking, well, if I get rid of Alex...
Well, it was the principal,
principal, forgive me. If I get rid of Alex, I get rid of the problem. Because Alex is talking about the problem. If no one's talking about the problem, there is no problem. You see that sort of reputation protection prioritised over everything else. I think it happens subconsciously once you reach a certain level of management. And you see it everywhere, in the church, in hospitals, and now in schools. Oh, God, crikey,
and because I'm young, I mean, I'm 25, I was always kind of seeing it, if I kind of open my mouth to give my voice or whatever, it was just like, you're young, like, you don't know what you're talking about, kind of looking down at me, like, who do you think you are? And it's like, hold on a second. These teachers or these whoever people that are doing these sort of things and saying these sort of comments are only a couple of years older than me.
Yes, of course.
So
it's nothing to do with age.
Do
you think that the men in the harassment of you, not the safeguarding issue with the child, because that's obviously an entirely different kettle of fish. Do you think that they, hand on heart, that they understood how much they were hurting you? Or do you think when they told each other, and indeed you, it was just banter, then actually they did genuinely believe that? Because a lot of men need help. That's why we're talking about Peter Hilton today.
Yeah, well, I think these men do need help, because when his mate said, I think you shouldn't have really said that, like he said to me, I kind of had a go at him. I'm like, what do you mean you kind of had a go at him? Because you're laughing about it, telling me, when I've just approached you saying, why has your best mate, when you were in the car with him, shouted down the road and called me a slag? And he was like, it's just
and
him.
And they're teaching children, they're teaching the next generation.
Exactly, and that's what's scary.
It is, and it's possibly a bit of a mistake of mine to focus on Dr. Peter Hilton's age as a consequence of what you and others are telling me about what is normal now. It is 11:32, and Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 25 minutes to 12, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. James, this one's unsigned. It's still going on as we speak, even with the younger consultants. I have recent examples, both personally and from another female consultant, that are truly shocking. When I raised a serious complaint against a consultant, I was asked by another male consultant to withdraw it for the sake of harmony in the department. My colleague won't raise a complaint as it would affect her career. It's easy to tell people to raise these points, but we are the ones who then suffer. I complained. Nothing was done. I was told he brings millions into the hospital and is a high-profile surgeon. Tony from Goole asks a question which I have to concede gave me a little bit of a shiver. He says, do you think the timing of all this is ideal for them losing support for the strikes? It all seems very handy for the government. No, I don't think that. It was a trade journal rather, but it did give me pause. But I, it's a question of priorities, I suppose. And then an avid listener from the Northeast who doesn't want to give their name says, I've had to pull over and text you this. Listening to you talk about this abhorrent chap from the NHS, albeit retired, I only wish you could be a fly on the wall in the garage where I work part-time. It's a well-known part of a well-known PLC, and this type of behaviour is commonplace. It's disgraceful, and it goes unreported, and I'm pretty sure it's the same throughout my industry. I'm leaving shortly and will be having my day at director level. I mean, look, one of the obvious answers to the question of how can this fellow end up thinking that it's okay is that it always was, right? Someone's been in touch to tell me that the Carry On film I was thinking of, probably from 1969, and Jim Dale played, I've lost the tweet now, but I think Barbara Windsor played Nurse Willing. So that's why I used Carry On, because this was always fine. So why isn't it fine now? It's an odd mindset, really, because, we'd still be sending kids up chimneys or trading slaves. But some people think, well, if we did it back then, if we did it yesterday, then it must be okay to do it tomorrow. So I get that bit of it. But the world we live in now, which some politicians and pundits are constantly telling us is too woke, the world we live in allows this stuff. That's the bit I don't get. I could almost say, if the world is so woke, how can people like Dr. Peter Hilton still think that most sexual harassment is trivial? As a man, how? And there's got to be something else going on, and a large part of it is impunity, I guess. And I think that notion of reputation protection. So I go to you, and you're my boss, and I say, I've got something quite unpleasant to report. And your first thought is, God, how do I make this go away? And the way you make it go away is actually by closing down the whistleblower, not the person that they're blowing the whistle about. I think that must be part of it as well. Catherine is in Hampstead. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello, Catherine.
Sorry, I'm a wee bit emotional about this
take all the
subject,
time you want.
okay?
Take all the time
So
you want.
I'm a retired consultant anaesthetist.
Okay.
And so I've worked all my life in theatres.
Yes.
I have never experienced any of this.
Okay.
And although obviously I've lived in a time not dissimilar from that surgeon who wrote to the Times, yes. And there's no doubt, in my experience anyway, that the culture has changed in terms of that kind of banter and nonsense that went on when I was a student and junior doctor.
Sure.
But the reason I phoned you is because there are so many aspects to this. That it's so complex. You're talking about our society and the way people behave. So you have to understand that these, and it's not just surgeons, I'm sure. Clearly. The surgeons are just one branch of specialty, doctors. So if it's happening in surgery, it's probably happening in other specialties as well. Anyway, we don't have evidence for that. The female surgeons are the ones who have spoken out, and so we have that evidence. But the point is, we come from a society where this is acceptable, irrespective of how abhorrent it is. But within the NHS, there is so there's a couple of points I'd like to make. The first thing is, when people speak like this, there's an assumption that this is rife and everyone gets a bad name. So part of the reason why people don't speak up is because once something bad happens in your hospital, the whole hospital gets a bad name. And for every one bad apple there are thousands of people working, their socks off to make the NHS work.
Yes.
So that is a part of the collective responsibility that we all live and work under. The extent of shame when something happens that's bad and brings disrepute to your hospital. And I'm not meaning you're trying to cover up. It's just that if there are personal things going on within staff, people don't try to not make it public because the public judge the hospital,
based on reputation protection. Reputation protection on a corporate level, but also, as you've explained to us, Catherine, on a personal level. It's almost as if your own reputation is tarnished by association.
Exactly, and at the end of the day, our priority is always protection of the public.
Of course.
And a lot of these complaints, the key question that will be asked by, higher management and everything is are the public in danger? That's the number one question. Are the public in danger? Is there a safety issue here? Now, you could say on the face of it there isn't, but actually, of course there is, because there is a team problem here, and you've got somebody who's mental health and everything is going to be affected by this. And the rest of the team, if they share this, it's just destructive behaviour.
Yes.
But so getting to the point of why I phoned you.
I said you could take all the time you wanted, Catherine, and I meant it.
Thank you. Well, I, was not afraid to speak out, against people who were bullied. And I said to your producer, this kind of behaviour is just another form of bullying.
Yes,
although I think probably people just, some blokes' mindsets might be that they think it's a bit of flirting, a bit of crack, and blah blah. But in the end, it is a form of bullying, and bullying is rife in the NHS. Peer-to-peer, junior to senior, senior to junior, different specialties to different specialties, nurses to doctors, doctors to nurses. It's just within the culture, and it's rife. And so...
Do we know why? Why is it rife? Because, the way you've described it sounds a little different from other sectors.
Well, it's because it's a massive institution, and every department is working under duress, under financial pressure, under targets, this and that and the other. And when people are under stress, they behave badly. And if people are under stress in conditions that they have no control over, they behave badly. And then, they're criticised for not doing the job that they are meant to do, or the targets are meant to meet, by people who do not understand their job. And therefore they feel disempowered, and so it goes on. And that happens throughout all departments. That's because,
for sure,
and because and then you have the media making some, comment which is just meaningless, but it's enough to make the public think we're a bunch of lazy.
I see what you mean. So, yeah, particularly when there's industrial action underway, you just get completely misrepresented by right-wing media. Crikey. So, what then? I'm a little clearer, a lot clearer, really, on how someone like this fellow ends up thinking, not just thinking what he thinks, but thinking it's so perfectly acceptable to think what he thinks that he's going to write it down and send it to the blooming Times. But he only retired. He only retired 3 years ago.
Okay, I know, but you'll always have people like that. And the thing is, you can't control other people. You can only control your response to them. Yes. And if we were all the same, then, life would be boring. And, everybody's not going to have the same value systems as would be ideal. Therefore, it's the same in every profession and every walk of life. You have a whole normal distribution of people's attitudes and behaviours, and the NHS employs hundreds of thousands of people. You can imagine the types, the array of personalities that are within all the different departments there, and somehow everyone has to be tolerated in some way so that the system will continue to work. So that
the wheels keep turning. That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. You've covered a lot of ground very, very expertly. And of course, there's also a huge, as you said yourself, I think your exact words, there's a huge array of behaviours. So you go from something like this, and the question of whistleblowing kicks in. Another retired consultant, Mark, has texted me to say the issue of how Hilton can get away with views like this is the same as how Letby got away with murder. NHS trusts protect their reputations above everything else. Often these senior, powerful men are mates with the CEO, the MD, or someone in power, so it gets put down to, it's just them. It's just the way they are. Everyone in the NHS often knows who the creeps are, but they're never taken down because of fear for career, which is, of course, what our other texter told us about her own career and her colleague's career, and fear of bullying and fear of the whistleblower being treated badly, which we've also heard evidence of today. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Mark. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11 minutes to 12. I'm with Richard in Sheffield on this because, as a side order to the general horror show of what this retired anaesthetist, has sent to the Times about female surgeons reporting endemic levels of sexual harassment and sexual assault. What's his problem with A-star grades? This is a genuine question. I just 10 minutes left before mystery hour. When I see young girls leaping up and down with A-star grades and getting into medical school, my heart sinks. Does anyone want to have a go at unravelling that bit? Richard writes, I'm not sure what's wrong with anyone jumping up and down because they got A stars at A level. Surely nobody knows what medicine is about until they go to medical school. That's the point of medical school. There's quite a lot of questions, and this is not the most serious question thrown up by this remarkable doubling down on the letter that he sent to the Times yesterday. But the anger about girls getting A star grades. And getting into medical school, my heart sinks. Then also, of course, they're not young girls; they're 18-year-old women. So possibly that choice of language is pertinent as well. But what's that about? It was a lot easier to become a doctor back then than it is now. So could Dr. Peter Hilton have been suffering from a form of academic insecurity for his entire life? Do you think? He managed to somehow scrape in with his 3 C's because Daddy was a doctor too. I'm just speculating, but I think we're allowed to speculate as much as we want about this fella, given how he feels about speculations. What would that be? The anger about young girls leaping up and down with A-star grades because they haven't got a clue what medicine is about, whereas 18-year-old boys do. 18-year-old boys who have got A-star grades also have a sort of innate grasp of what medicine is all about. What the heck is he on about? I thank you, Richard, for drawing that to our attention. I think that's a very relevant question as well, although obviously not the most important one that we've asked in the context of this. It is 11:51. Janie is in Sheringham in Norfolk. Janie, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
Thank
Jane.
you for taking my call.
Very welcome.
I'm very, very passionate about this topic, really. If I may, I wanted to comment on your last 2 callers, if I may.
Of course you may.
Catherine, I loved Catherine's call right up until the end bit when she suggested that people's values or people's personalities meant that we can't control how people are.
Right.
I think there's a clear line between a personality and sexual harassment.
Yes.
And I think that's when things get really dangerous, if we start to say, oh, well, that's just them, that's their character. Well, actually, that's offensive.
That's just the way they are. Catherine's perfectly capable of defending herself. I don't think she was quite saying that. I think it was more in the context of my slightly clumsy question about how this fella ended up believing the things that he believed. And she was essentially saying, because that's what these men are like. So it was more explanation than excuse, I think, Janie.
She commented on their values, didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other, Alex, the lady who was the TA in the school.
Yes.
I've worked with safeguarding within schools for many, many years, and I think she was just treated atrociously.
Clearly.
If that was a safeguarding issue, then she should go to LADO, which is a local authority designated officer, because things don't just stop with the head.
Of course
so
they don't.
Can go
but this is the whole point about whistleblowing, isn't it? Is that it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's usually just on your own shoulders that you carry these burdens of responsibility and consequence.
There's always people higher than the principal.
True.
And I'm assuming within the hospital as well.
Yes.
But just to quickly go over my example of this, when I was 16, that was in the mid-80s, my first job was a silver service waitress.
Oh, yeah.
And in the evening, the head waiter, who was Spanish, drove everyone home. On this occasion, I was asked to go back. He drove me to a hotel. He asked me to get a room with him. I told him no. He then drove down a farm track, put his hand on my knee, wanted to do whatever, and I said no. Thank God we just went home. The next day, I told the other waitresses about it, and we spoke to the manager, and the manager said to me, if you think I'm going to sack my head flambe waiter for a pin money waitress, you can forget it.
Brutal. But that's the 80s.
And I felt shame. I felt embarrassed.
Well, that was
that. That's how bad things were, and I think that's kind of why I'm really passionate about this topic as well.
I'm sure it is, because it was so normalised then that you ended up almost being cast as the person at fault in that context, which is truly breathtaking. Just briefly, Janie, that kind of stuff still goes on in the context of what that perv tried to do to you in the car.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that the boss would still behave in the way that the boss did today in most companies in 2023?
In most companies, no.
But there'll still be some outliers, especially if it's a company. And this is the thing about hospitals, actually, I think that there's so much power concentrated in these individuals and these institutions. There's so much power concentrated right at the top, like a really tight pyramid, that they can behave in ways that wouldn't be tolerated anywhere else. I'm sorry for what you went through. I can tell it's still there, still hurts. But my goodness me, the fact that you ended up feeling shame just shows how toxic the whole environment can be. Take care, Janie. Thank you. Darren is in London. Darren, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Big fan of yours.
That's very good.
Been listening to you for many, many years,
yes,
but never,
more than we
really
care to remember, or certainly count, Darren.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just kind of this subject about the medical school kind of really touched the nerve, really, because my daughter's just been through that.
Go on.
And I kind of understand the way that the chap was saying about, he shudders when girls. I know it's not a really appropriate choice of words, but when girls get A stars and then they want to go to medical school because they've got all these big dreams.
Yes.
And I guess when they get the results, all excited and they're thinking, okay, this is my future and this is what I've worked so hard for all these years. And then and he knows very well what they're going to sort of suffer when they go through the process,
I don't know but I see what you mean. So he's saying, he's not really saying that he feels sorry for them because they're going to encounter men like me. Or do you think he is?
I think there's a bit of that in there.
Maybe. I saw it as something else. I think he just doesn't think they make very good doctors because they're women.
No, I didn't really see it like that.
No, fair enough. We're both listening to the same words. What has your daughter's experience been then? Have her dreams not been...
Well, I mean, she's obviously it's my daughter, so I'm going to say that she's fantastic. But she's a top-class student. She's had A stars through every exam she's ever sat. And, she's in the top percentile in her medical school. It's one of the best medical schools in England. So,
but other elements of it have not lived up to her expectations or dreams.
Well, it's just the whole process of actually becoming a doctor.
Yes.
I mean, the way that they choose their specialities, which is changing. Through her cohort,
right?
They had to sort of do publications and do various research groups, which all adds to your CV, basically.
Yes, your
capital. So you can get a good choice of which speciality you want to go through. And it's kind of like I don't know what the best way to describe it, but it's like they're sort of having to reach out to various professors and people like who are on top of their field, basically, and sort of say to them, well, look, I want to do this research with you, and can you help? And it becomes a sort of a power game, isn't it? It's like they've got all the power, and they know that these young girls who want these sort of placements, etc.
Yes,
they're sort of they're prey.
So it bleeds into harassment then.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's experienced that. She's actually had a couple of close encounters in the sense that she's had gone to various meetings to
for entirely professional reasons.
Yeah, totally professional, but it didn't sort of turn out like that. And then as soon as she made it very clear to the various people that were involved, now look, this is just purely a business, not a business, well, an educational sort of relationship. That all the interest sort of dropped, and then they know they weren't interested in taking her on any further. Which
that's grim, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of really, I had to really pick her up a few times, to say.
It's nice that she can talk to you.
It's not the way the world is.
I mean, that's the toughest thing for a dad, though, isn't it? Because it's not the way the world should be.
Well, yeah, but
there's no but there.
Yeah, no, you're right, James. I agree with you. But what can you do? You're faced with these cats. I mean, my girl, she's blessed with, she's a fairly attractive young lady.
She took after her mum then.
Everyone says that, but you beat me to it. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. She's got my brains, though.
Oh, that's nice. But so you have to say to her, this is what happens, simply so that she doesn't feel that she's been singled out, but that in many ways is worse than...
Yeah, well...
It's very hard to know what to say.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, do I tell her, well, look, put a sort of a hood on whenever you go for an interview and do an anonymous
but
kind
it's
of...
going to be happening to every woman, isn't it? And when it's a power play rather than sexual gratification, which a lot of the perforated line between harassment and bullying can be, then there's nothing you can do to... And also, inevitably, of course, putting the responsibility again on the woman to moderate or police the behaviour of the men. It's nice that she can talk to you about that stuff, Darren. You must have got a lot right over the years that she can come to you with these sort of issues. Not every dad would have done. It's just gone 12 noon, and it's Mystery Hour next.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 4 minutes after 12, and it is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else in the radio universe. You ring in with a question and someone else rings in with an answer. All right, I mean, it doesn't sound that exciting when I put it like that, but you're going to have to trust me that it is. It is the most reliably amusing hour that we spend together every week. And by reliably, I mean always amusing. But usually the most amusing. But occasionally we stumble across a subject that can be even more... I'm just burbling now. You can also win a Mystery Hour game, which is brilliant. And... yours if you make my favourite contribution of the day. The full terms and conditions of the competition are at lbc.co.uk. If you want to find out more about the game, or indeed get in early with your Christmas purchases, or why not treat yourself? You deserve it. You've worked hard this week. You deserve a little present. Get over to mysteryhour.co.uk and fill your boots. I think we'll just crack straight on, shall we, this week? I don't see why not. The number remains the same, whether you have a question or an answer, 0345 6060 973. You're not allowed to look things up. I want to make that absolutely clear. So when you ring in with your answer, I will ask what your qualifications are. And by that, I don't mean I've got a bag of gymnastics award for, or I passed my cycling proficiency at Stourport Police Station in 1986. I mean... that'd be a coincidence. That'd be two of us. I mean, how do you know the thing that you know? So it might be because you've got a PhD in applied mathematics, or it might be because you saw, I don't know, someone talking about it on the telly last night. So it doesn't matter how you know. I just need to establish how you know what you know so that I can establish whether or not it is definitive. And if it's definitive, you'll get a round of applause. There is one other gift, of course. There is one other phenomenon in my gift, which is not confined to Mystery Hour, although Mystery Hour has been the scene of more of them than anything else, and that is, of course, the Ray Liotta, which we have had recently in pretty spectacular circumstances, but not on Mystery Hour. So if you ring in with qualifications that are above and beyond the wildest dreams of a humble radio presenter, then we have a very special treat for you. But that means it's a bit like you get a question about a sandwich toaster and your dad invented the sandwich toaster. Is that ageist? Would you still be alive if you invented the sandwich? Well, anyway, if you did invent the sandwich toaster, you'd get a Ray Liotta if you rang in to answer a question about the sandwich toaster. I don't know why I say the sandwich toaster, as if it is like a sort of definitive thing. It could just be a sandwich, but you invented the first sandwich toaster. And I don't mean a toaster, I mean a toasted sandwich toaster, like a Breville is what we had. Should we crack on? I think we should. 7 after 12. Juliet's in Marlow. Juliet, question or answer?
It's a question, James. So I'm just laughing at how many times you said sandwich toaster.
Sandwich toaster. The
yeah.
sandwich, not just any sandwich toaster.
No.
The sandwich toaster. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. If I may just start off by saying that you're a bit of a hero in our household, and it's extremely exciting to actually talk to you.
Oh, how lovely! Thank you very much. Have you read Robert Thorogood's books?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Because they're set in Marlow. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yes. No, I know. The Death in Marlow.
Yes,
Marlow.
you give it a whirl. They're wonderful books. Wonderful books.
Yes. Well, they're all sitting nicely in the front of Marlow Bookshop.
There you go.
Together next to Richard Osman's books are there as well.
Well, you need to liberate Roberts at the first opportunity.
Okay, I will do.
Carry on.
Yes, I will. You're a huge hero in our house. My husband,
thank you.
I think, he has an intellectual man crush on you.
Oh, that's delightful. It's mutual.
It is. He's a nice man.
I'm sure he is. You married him.
I know. Well, I'm babbling on like you did before, so I'll try and contain myself.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is to do with rugby, which I thought was quite apt at the moment. We were watching one of the matches the other night, and when all the lists of the names came up and the positions and the players, etc., the numbers all have a position. You've got the number 11 for left wing, 14 for right wing,
yes.
I think 10's flanker, etc.
But number 8, poor number 8, doesn't have a name. Why is number 8 only called number 8?
As in prop, lock, scrum half, fly half, inside
Yeah,
centre.
they all have numbers, but number 8 doesn't have a name. It's called number 8.
Yes.
It doesn't have its other name. So why does number 8 not have a name?
I've got a...
Please don't answer it.
What, do you not want me to answer? I thought I was a hero in your household.
Yes, you are. Absolutely. Yes. Carry on.
No, I won't. I'll leave. But I think it's evolved. I think the French call it something else, and there's a clue there as to why we don't. So no, I'll put it on the board, Juliet, because I can tell that you're going to be deep after such a lovely talk up of I think I'd feel terrible if I let you down by answering when you clearly want a proper expert to come on. It's a great question, though, I think.
Thank you. Well, I have had about 6 other questions in the lineup over the past year or so, but my husband said they weren't good enough.
Well, don't listen to him. What does he know? Honestly.
I don't know.
So why is he a number 8 as opposed to a kind of back row anchor or something like that? Although you probably want to be shouting that on a rugby pitch on a regular basis. Juliet, lovely stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Steve is in Bromsgrove, which is part of the world I also know. Steve, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why did humour come into our evolution?
That's obvious.
Is it?
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, it's all about... You know what it's all about?
No, go on. Carry on.
Reproducing, isn't it? It's all about reproducing your genes.
Okay.
And funny people are more attractive than unfunny people. That doesn't answer your question, actually, at all, does it?
It doesn't, no. We were just chatting the other day about how, obviously comedy's changed over time. We were actually at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival when this topic came up. And then it sort of, the question went back to why did it start in the first place, really?
I mean, you can see other species almost laughing at stuff, can't you?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that answers the question, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Would it even be evolution? Would it even be evolution? What's your humour? Why do we have a sense of humour? Why do we find stuff funny? Is that the question?
It's pretty dull without it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it would, yeah.
Yeah, why do we find stuff funny? Why do we have a sense of humour? I like that question a lot. I don't know. I mean, what would it be? An anthropologist? Who would know the answer to this?
Possibly, yeah.
I love it.
You would.
No chance, mate. And I love it, though. It's a great question. Thank you, Steve. 0345 6060 973. Is the number that you need. Why do we have a sense of humour? Does it have an evolutionary purpose? I mean, to put your enemies, but that doesn't explain why it exists. Well, if it came about as a genetic quirk, came about with consciousness, I could sit here now for the next 20 minutes talking absolute gibberish. That's a mark of what a good question it is, but I won't. Jane's in Telford. Jane, question or answer?
Question, please.
Yes.
Okay, so we're both kids of the 80s.
Yes.
And in the 80s, we would stroke our chins and say chinny rack on.
Yes, we would, it's true.
And also Jeffrey.
Tutankhamun? I never said Tutankhamun.
Tutankhamun?
I did Jimmy Hill.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy Hill was another one. And Jeffrey, I don't know where Jeffrey came from either.
Nor do I. I don't know that one.
No, but where does it come from? Why did we do it?
Chinny reckon. You got a long chin.
Yeah, you go chinny rack on if you thought somebody was pulling it out.
You stroke your chin. I had no idea. Well, the Jimmy Hill, it all goes back to the chin. So Jimmy Hill obviously evolved from Chinny Reckon because Jimmy Hill had a famously big chin.
Yeah, and Tutankhamun as well.
Oh, Tutankhamun had a big chin.
Yeah.
So it's all about a big chin. Do you stroke your chin when you're being sceptical?
Yes, exactly. Where does that come from?
Well, that's where it comes from. So you say something and I don't believe it, and I start stroking my chin like that. I'm acting now. This will work well on the YouTube program. So say something that's not true, like that Nigel Farage seems like a nice bloke or something like that.
Well, yeah. Boris is ace.
There you go. Oh, I'm stroking my chin there, you see, a bit. And then over the years, I don't just stroke my chin. I don't know what's happened to your phone. I go in for a kind of, chinny chin.
Yeah, exactly.
Chin.
But why are you stroking your chin?
I think you just, I don't know. All right, chins. What have chins got to do with scepticism?
Yeah, and the chinny rack on, yeah.
Well, that's where that comes next. But we need to establish the relationship between the chin and the disbelief.
Exactly, yeah.
Great question. Great work, Jane. Thank you. I'm going to write down chins as my little reminder of what that question was about. 13 minutes after 12 is the time. You do, don't you? Chin stroking. But did chin stroke... I like that. I like all these questions, but I'm not massively optimistic that we're going to get answers to any of them yet. Emma is in Hawley. Emma, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Emma.
Okay, James, I am a menopausal woman.
Okay.
And I would like to know why menopausal women get hot flushes. I totally understand all the mood swings, the lack of sleep and all that, but why hot flushes? What's that all about?
Why would it have a different source from the other stuff? Just sort of, I mean, I don't want to sound...
all the other hormones regulate your mood.
Yeah.
But why heat? Why do women suddenly go up in temperature by 10 degrees? What has that got to do with a lack of estrogen?
Anything at all. Yeah, okay. I like it. Regulation, is it the thyroid gland? Why am I talking now, Emma?
I'm actually a menopause blogger, and I want to know the answer to this from a doctor, because I don't get it.
No.
It's like blushing from your feet up, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
No. I mean, all right, you're on. Why, with the biological, anatomical explanation of,
yes, please.
Of hot flushes.
Yes.
Okay, and then you can blog about the excitement of being on the Mystery Hour.
Yeah. No, I can just blurt it out and pretend it's all my information.
That's what we all do.
Absolute nonsense.
We all do that. There'll be a tipping point when so many people are listening to Mystery Hour that none of us can pass off what we learn from it as proper knowledge anymore. We'll have to concede where we heard it. Okay, so hot flushes, chins, humour, and the number 8. Have you got answers for any of those? You know what to do. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:17 is the time. Mystery Hour continues. 4 questions that need answers. Why do we call the number 8 in rugby the number 8 when the other 14 players all have proper job titles, like fullback and winger? Why do we have a sense of humour? I love that question. I can't tell you how much I love that question. Sorry, I just punched my microphone again. I do apologise. Why do we have a sense of humour? I mean, it might be a really obvious answer. It might be an impossible one. Why do we associate chins with scepticism? Whether you're going, chinny chin chin, or Jimmy Hill. What is it about chins that helps us to express scepticism? And why do menopausal women have hot flushes? There's quite a lot there, something for everybody. Stephen is in Cambridge. Stephen, question or answer?
Hi, James. I've got a question, and it's a bit of a weird one. I don't know exactly where I got to when I was thinking about it. Okay. But so I was thinking about, famous people over the years who've been assassinated, like, Lincoln, JFK, people like that.
Yes.
And just made me wonder, why is it said that they're assassinated and they're not murdered? So how important do you have to be to say that you're assassinated rather than being murdered?
I don't think it's about that, because if Lincoln had been killed by Mrs. Lincoln, it would have been a murder, not an assassination.
So what makes it an assassination rather than a murder if it's someone that you don't know?
Yeah.
If I go down the street and, murder someone, I've murdered that person, but I've not assassinated them.
There's not like a hard and fast rule, but an assassination is done for what you might describe as public reasons rather than private reasons. So it's a public figure who is being murdered for reasons associated with their public status. So when a politician is murdered by a white supremacist terrorist, it becomes an assassination. But if Mrs. Lincoln had murdered Abraham Lincoln, it would not be an assassination. So when Mark Chapman killed John Lennon, it's an assassination because he's killing John Lennon precisely because of his public status, because of his public interventions, because he's John Lennon, not because he's got on his nerves in a road rage incident.
Okay, so then I guess I trust you'll know this better than I will.
Go on.
Who've unfortunately been murdered in the public life, and you may be able to tell me if the headline said that they were assassinated.
I can't. The phone line went south. Then you're only really allowed one question. You're not really allowed supplementaries. But you can have another go. But if the phone line doesn't work, then we'll call it quits. What did you just say, Stephen?
Okay, so basically, I'm thinking about British politics and politicians who've been unfortunately murdered over the years.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to remember if there's headlines.
No, they're all assassinations. They're all assassinations, but you might find certainly some coverage in right-wing newspapers of assassinations undertaken by terrorists with very similar views on immigration to the editors of those newspapers. They sometimes balk at the language that you might expect to be used, but they are most definitely assassinations. So because they are done for political reasons, the killing of someone for a reason linked entirely to their public status. So JFK, Martin Luther King, always assassinations, and Joe Cox, an assassination. David Amos, an assassination. It is. The last one's a little different, actually, because I'm not sure we ever learnt the reasons behind what had motivated that man. But because it's a politician and not known personally to the killer, I'd file that under assassination and terrorism, of course. And there's my round of applause. Thank you, Stephen. Jonathan's in Croxdale. Jonathan, question or answer?
Hi, James.
Hello.
It's answer.
Yes.
It's to do with the humour one. You as usual, were very, very close, but hadn't quite nailed why.
Go on.
So, in common with most things that are very prevalent in populations, it's because it's sexually attractive. So,
Yes.
Obviously that gets passed down, which is what you nailed. The reason why,
But you don't. Is it hereditary? Because you could. I mean, do we inherit a sense of humour from our parents?
Well, this is what I'm going to go on to say.
Go on.
It's because it's an unfakeable demonstration of intelligence.
Yeah.
It's rather like art or many other things that we imagine if you listen to someone in a pub who's just memorised a load of possibly slightly racist jokes,
Yes.
and they're very, very boring very, very quickly.
Yes.
But someone, if you listen to Eddie Izzard freestyling,
You're in
someone
the
who's
presence of
genuinely
genius.
witty like that, you're absolutely in awe of them. You're like, this guy's like a magician.
It's why panel shows are so popular, because the speed and the quick-wittedness is pure intelligence. You might
Yes,
say.
exactly. And people aren't even really aware of it. When we used to have those ads in the back of newspapers and things, it would always say GSOH for good sense of humour.
Of course,
but people, or I'm looking for someone who really likes the theatre, or looking for someone who wants to go around museums with me. People aren't really aware that how much they value intelligence, because there's a sortative mating these days as well, where so many people find their partners through work.
But so this is why
university and stuff.
So I mean, this is why it works. It's not why it exists. Would it have come into existence like everything else? As once we sort of became conscious of comedy, conscious of humour, people who had it had a reproductive advantage over people who didn't.
Exactly. As soon as something has value, like a peacock's tail,
Yes.
Once it's got value, then the biggest and the best peacock's tail is the one that's the most valuable, because that will leave descendants which are likely to have a similarly magnificent peacock's tail, which will leave descendants and descendants and descendants. So, things become sexually attractive because they're sexually attractive, without having necessarily to have another value. But in this case, as I say, it does have a value because it's expressing native intelligence in a way that can't really be taught.
Love it. I love it. That's why it's valuable. That's a beautiful answer.
Yes.
Qualifications?
I'm a novelist. I've spoken to you many times before, happily.
But that doesn't qualify you to answer this question.
No, I wrote a novel called Genus, or Genus, depending on how you pronounce it, which is about genetics. It was very nearly turned into a film, but collapsed at the last moment in the summer of 2016.
Let it go.
I blame Brexit.
Let it go, Jonathan.
But then I blame it for most things.
It'll come back round again. You'll enjoy Sebastian Faulks' new one, I think.
Ah, cool. Yes, I haven't had a
he's looking at
about that period.
He's looking at genetics quite from quite an interesting perspective. It's a really Seventh Son. It's called. It's a really good book. So you stick that on your list.
I will. Yes, I will search.
And everyone else can put Genus by Jonathan Tregell on their list.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. You're a kind man as ever.
I do my best. 12. Well, I can't plug my book on this programme as mercilessly as I do without allowing. That's two others, Lynn Featherstone and yourself today have also. And I plugged your book. You didn't plug it yourself. I love that answer, though. And I mean, because it is that idea of... And also, people who've not had a lot of formal education, but who are naturally funny, are clever. And you know that they're clever because that's what the phrase quick-witted means in many ways. Round of applause for Jonathan, please. Do check out Jonathan's work as well. Jonathan Trigell is his professional name. Jeremy's in Cobham. Jeremy, question or answer?
Answer to the rugby. I'm not saying I know the 100% of the history, but I think the question was wrong.
Oh.
Because actually, originally, people had nothing on their shirts at all.
Right.
And didn't have names, and it's different in different parts of the world. So as you know, New Zealand, they call their centres 5/8s, not centres. So what happened was the All Blacks, like always start these things, they decided to try and get their team better known to the public, so they actually started using the numbers system first. In other parts of the world, they used different things, so the Welsh were the ones who started using the names rather than the numbers. But actually, the number 8 was called a lock originally.
Yes.
Because he locked the scrum. And in France, they don't even call him number 8. They still think they use the old term for funny what it was.
Yeah.
And then as the second row started to be called locks themselves, they couldn't call the number 8 lock. So it was called, in Welsh, it was called the 8th man.
Right.
It was the 8th man of the scrum, and that has now become number 8. But I don't think they were called names before they were numbers.
No, but the question still stands, as in, why have they got a number, only a number, when everyone else has got a name now?
But they used to have a name.
Yes, exactly, and it's evolved out of existence because I mean, in a way, it probably suits the number 8 lock, suits the number 8 better than it suits the locks, doesn't it? In a way,
exactly, it does actually, yes.
But there it is, and they're all the back row. Flankers are back row as well, aren't they? Technically,
well, the back 3, yes, you have 6, 7, and 8, and also we don't know this, but in New Zealand, for instance, the 6 and the 7 aren't the same roles as they are in the rest of the world. So the open side flanker for us is 7, which is what I used to play. And the blind side is 6, but in New Zealand, they wear the other shirts the way around.
Probably the best position, open side flanker, isn't it?
I thought so. Well, I used to play prop, but then I got injured too much, so I lost weight and became a flanker.
Open side flanker, because you can. It's the true high. I mean, every player these days is a hybrid, aren't they? Every player is a post Lomu. You've got people in the scrum who are quicker than backs would have been when I was a kid, and you've got people in the back line who look like props and run faster than anyone did. But back in the day, open side flanker was the first hybrid rugby player, I think.
Yes, I think so.
Love it. Qualifications?
I'm just a massive rugby fan.
That'll do.
That's it.
Round of applause for Jeremy. Who do you fancy for the World Cup? Do you think it's a foregone conclusion?
I'd love France to win it, as I've got some French heritage, and I'd like the Northern Hemisphere team to win it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling South Africa will be there, but France would be my first choice.
Really? I think Ireland are due a bit of a second, third, fourth, fifth gear. We shall see. France are looking powerful. 28 minutes after 12 is the time, but you'd be a brave man to bet against South Africa. And that concludes this year's Sports Bulletin. That's it for 2023. Squeeze in, Holly. I've got some phone lines free. Crikey, that never happens on Thursdays. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And the questions that currently still need answers involve... So we've done the rugby. I like the rugby answer. I've done the assassination answer. Why do menopausal women... have hot flushes? Why do we associate the chin with scepticism? That's it. We've answered the other 3. I haven't written down the names of the answerers. I'll consult with Keith during the next news bulletin, which conveniently enough is here now. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mystery Hour continues. Let's crack straight on. Holly is in Worcester. Holly, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
I'd like to know whether using a handheld fan, so like a Spanish fan or a piece of card, actually cools your body temperature down. So I think it does. I think if you fan it like in your hot spots, like your neck, etc., it will cool your body temperature down. However, my husband thinks the kinetic energy used, the energy used in fanning yourself, actually makes you hotter.
Well, if it did, we wouldn't do it, would we?
I know, but is it just a sensation of cooling yourself down at that time?
But if you've got sweat on your skin, then the cool breeze will will definitely work because it will draw the heat out from your skin.
Well, yeah. That's what I think. So
I think you're right. It also moves the warmer air that's near your skin as well. So
yeah,
it's got to
work. He thinks that when you stop the act of fanning, you built up so much energy. You've actually.
How vigorous? Pardon for asking this. It's quite an intimate question, but how vigorously does he fan?
Well, he doesn't because he thinks it will make him.
Of course he doesn't because he thinks it's a waste of energy. But have you told him to try it on a slightly lower setting, as it were?
Yeah, maybe.
That might do it. All right, so do fans work?
Yes.
Handheld little fans. There's quite a lot on the London Underground at the moment, Holly, of people carrying little electric ones.
Yeah, so yeah, and I know my sister just got one of the ones that you wear around your neck.
It's been so hot lately. You can see the sense of it. I always try and sit next to them. Just to get a second-hand breeze. Holly, you're on. Thank you. Do fans work? Yeah, it doesn't need anything more complicated than that. Or does the fact that you're exercising essentially to wave it cancel out any cooling benefits that you might otherwise enjoy? I'm pretty sure they must work. I mean, they're endemic in many, many cultures. Glenn's in Pontefract. Glenn, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Okay. I was sat with Mrs. the other day. We were sat looking at some TikTok videos.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw a video of a bride and groom releasing a pair of doves.
Oh, yeah.
And one of these unfortunate doves just did a nosedive, and it obviously held onto it a little bit too tight. My question is...
hang on a minute. What? Oh, that's why it was on TikTok. That's why it had gone viral. He killed the dove.
That's it. I think it might have just been stunned. I like to think they were a stunned dove.
A stunned. I've got all their albums. Go on.
Yeah. So my question is...
Yeah.
Obviously, a wedding planner would have organised these doves to be released, but what happens with them when they're released?
Where do they go?
Where do they go? Are they just wild doves? Are they homing doves? Do they come back to wedding planner?
Well, yeah. I like this question a lot. I mean, someone will know because there'll be someone listening who does it or who had it at their wedding.
Who rents these doves out, or are they bred specially? Or
I mean, I think doves and pigeons are either different versions of the same business or very, very closely related. So you can train a pit, but I mean, quite a lot of fuss to go to, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if you think about it, it's money for old rope, and once it's trained,
yeah, that's it.
They release them. They come back to wedding planner, and he uses them again next week.
You've got no overheads apart from a bit of seed.
A bit of seed, that's it. A bit of TLC.
A bit of TLC, a bit of seed, and a loft. It's all you need. A dove cut, a dove loft. I don't think I've ever told anyone this before. I at one point, I was one of the journalists most favoured by the Beckhams, Glenn, back in the day when I did the first interview with David after the Simeone incident in the World Cup. I don't know if you remember. He was public enemy number one. They were burning it, and they had the choice.
Viciously kicked him, didn't he?
Yeah, give or take. I mean, I think he probably deserved it. But I did and it was very hard to get close to them. But I really liked them. I did the big interview with him, and for some stupid reason, at their wedding, they released doves. And I wrote a little article about how naff it was, right?
Yeah.
And I got a phone call, like literally that morning before I'd even got into work, off their PR person saying that I'd really, really, really upset Victoria. And I thought, well, of course I have, because I've taken the mickey out of her wedding. And that was it. That was the end of my brief friendship with the Beckhams. You don't make an enemy out of Beckhams. You don't make an enemy out of the Beckhams. But that's what I think of when I think of doves at weddings. It comes back like a haunting, and that would be what, 20 odd years ago. Glenn, thank you, mate. I shall find out. Where do the doves go? Maybe Victoria will ring him. We can have a rapprochement, and she can tell us where the doves went on her wedding day. 12:38 is the time. I still feel bad about that. It was such a stupid thing to do. I was so desperate for bylines. Someone must have said in conference, does anyone want to write an article about how naff the Beckham's wedding was? I didn't even think it was naff. I thought it was lovely. They had thrones and everything. And I said, I'll do that, because I got my name in the paper the next day, and I probably didn't have any stories as usual to give to the editor. So if you know them, would you pass on my apologies? It's not likely that they remember, but I do still feel very bad about it. Thank you, mate. Tim's in Burnham. Tim, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Tim.
Well, we've got the North Downs and the South Downs and the Epsom Downs and the Lambourne Downs.
And the ups and downs.
And they're all ups.
Ups.
They're all high ground.
Yes.
So why are they called the Downs?
Why are they called the Downs? Why are the Downs called the Downs? The Downs.
When they're ups.
When they're ups. It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, would we have grazed sheep on them once? Could it be something to do with that?
I don't know, but why would you still call them the Downs?
I don't know. You're not letting this one go, are you?
No, not really.
No.
No, I've been thinking of it for a while, but...
so what is a down exactly? Just remind me. So
it's like a high ground, isn't it? Where they, they're often used, like Epsom Downs, South Downs.
Yeah. All right. Why are they called downs when they're above? They're higher than sea level, obviously, but they're also higher than what we might loosely describe.
Average, I suppose.
Yeah, higher than ground level. We might loosely describe it as or average. Why when they appear to be ups? Why are they called downs? I like that question, mate. You're on.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. I should do my best to get you an answer. Tim and Downs, and then the one before that was the Doves. It's 12:39. Suzanne is in Northwich. Suzanne, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
It could be two answers if you let me.
No, only one, I'm afraid, madam.
Oh, well, can I correct the humour one?
Them's the rules.
We'll go with the estrogen.
No, whatever you cleared.
One.
Yeah, you can do the menopause one.
Yeah, it's to do with estrogen and closing of the capillaries due to estrogen and endocrine systems.
I mean, those at the moment are just words that you are saying. You now need need to join them together in an illuminating fashion.
An illuminating fashion, okay. Your endocrine system puts out hormones.
Yes.
Which estrogen is one of them.
Right.
And estrogen closes your capillaries.
Okay.
And progesterone opens your capillaries.
Right.
So that's where you get the flushes.
But why does having closed capillaries lead to flushes?
Because it closes and then it opens.
Yeah, but how
then the blood comes through.
So the capillaries go small, and then when they open up again,
get wider, and you get flushed through
because the blood starts pumping through you at a greater rate. So it's regulation, it's thermoregulation. Then is what we're talking about.
I'm a person without thermoregulation.
Are you?
I'm terminally ill, but I don't have thermoregulation. No, you're not.
Of course I am, Suzanne.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I am.
I know.
Of course I'm sorry. I'm not sorry enough to let you answer two questions, but I'm still sorry. It still counts.
But that's what happens.
What are your qualifications?
Like I said to you, I think you're a producer.
Yes.
I'm a woman.
Yeah, but so was the person who asked the question.
Yeah, but...
But how do you know? Who explained? How did you look? Did you look it up? Did someone tell you? Did you ask the doctor?
Doctors. No, I know what's happening. Yeah, I answered your spiderweb question last week.
I remember, and it was brilliant. But you didn't. You didn't know the words estrogen and progesterone when you were born, did you? So where did this information land inside? When did it come from?
You learn it.
I know. Where?
You're hard at it.
What?
Where?
Yes.
University.
Right. What did you study?
I did science. I did.
That's very broad.
Yeah.
That's very broad.
Yeah. And it's a page turner, apparently. My dissertation.
That was on spiders, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it was on.
Well, what's that got to do with? What did you learn about hot flushes in a dissertation about spiders? Spiders I don't know that I can give you a round of applause.
I don't even want a round of applause. I've not even got my bloody board game yet.
Did you win last week?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I think we might have a steward's inquiry, Suzanne, about that, actually.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
I'm not going to name them. Eleanor went on holiday and Elliot was supposed to phone me. But no, I'd rather have a book, thanks.
I haven't read. I mean, it's not out until November the 2nd. I'll have to speak to the publisher about giving those away.
Can I actually live that long?
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I can't get it published any quicker. I'll make some calls. I'll make some calls, Suzanne. I'll tell them it's a matter of life and death.
No, but no. Right, we're being sarcastic with each other.
We are.
I don't know, but
you look after yourself.
Do you know what?
I'm going to give you the round of applause.
I don't want a Ray Liotta.
I know you can't have a Ray Liotta. I mean, unless you invented hot flushes. But you can have that. I'll give you that. I'll give you.
But I can understand that.
No, you look after yourself. We'll talk again probably next week.
You asked me where I know this.
Yes, I know. I'm still waiting for you to tell me.
Yeah,
what?
I am trying to. But do you know what? You're talking over me.
I'm flipping not.
You bloody well are.
All right, I'll be quiet now.
Finally. No, I've done so many different parts of my degree to be a teaching assistant. I was going to be a teacher.
Right.
And I failed. But I've done science. I've done science all my life. We spoke 5 years ago when I was reading papers from China. I've got nothing else to do than just look at bloody science.
You're absorbing it all and putting it to perfect use on Miss Chow on an almost weekly basis. Did we give Susan?
No, it's only 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, but that's 2 weeks weekly for a fortnight. Technically. You look after yourself, Suzanne. Stay safe.
Yeah.
All right. Mine, there you go. It's just gone 1:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's like heads and tails, chins and fans, ups and downs. If you're just tuning in, this is actually LBC, a world-beating current affairs station where we discuss in deep and pungent fashion the breaking stories of the moment, and sometimes they let people on who just sing meaningless ditties to themselves for no apparent reason. Jay's in Southend. Jay, question or answer?
It's an answer, mate.
Carry on.
It's the fans.
Yes.
So, the lady said about the cooling effect of fans and if they work. So the principle is evaporative cooling. Now, obviously, when your body produces sweat, you blow the cold air onto you with the fan.
Yeah.
It evaporates, thus cooling you down.
Yeah.
Now, the same principle inside of an aircon machine, or the other aircon units you've probably got in your studio when you go into the office. Exactly the same principle is that instead of you're using the air in your hand as a fan, it's just using refrigerant gas going through a condenser and a radiator, which then blows cold air out into you.
Yeah.
So the issue where she wanted to know about was, does it produce any extra heat from your fan?
Does waving the fan create so much heat that you end up hotter than you would be if you weren't waving?
Yeah. So the amount of the effect of the evaporative cooling upon your body just by the fan cooling, like with your fan cooling the air with using the hand fan, it's so powerful, it overtakes any heat that's generated by you doing it.
Of course it does. I mean, honestly, I don't know what Holly's husband's thinking of on this one. The idea, because you think it's thousands of years, isn't it, Jay, that people have been, whether it's flamencos or I think Japan, and in the 19th century, there was a whole language of fans. Aristocratic women would communicate with each other using fans in certain positions to convey little messages across the dance floor. So the idea that they were all wasting their time because secretly getting hotter every time they waved it, I don't know what he was. I mean, for heaven's sake. Qualifications?
I used to be an air conditioning engineer.
That'll do nicely. Have a round of applause.
Thank you very much, mate.
Well played, Jay. Thank you.
Nice to speak to you again.
Very kind. Likewise. Big fan. You didn't realise you did it then. Keith spotted that, not me. Credit where it's due. 10 to 1 is the time. Sue's in Bristol. Sue, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Sue.
Well, it's an answer to the Downs question. Why are downs called downs when they're hills?
Yes.
And it's simply because the word has become a corruption over probably thousands of years.
Right.
So, of course, as we know, Britain, it had migration, the Romans, the Angles.
Yeah, the sooner we get them all. So send them all back where they came from, I say.
And then each time new immigration arrived, they would tack on how they would describe a region geographically.
Yes.
Another example would be Cambridge. So that's the bridge over the River Cam.
Yes.
Because there were no maps. So the only way people knew who were travelling around where they were was by the look of the landscape. So, for example, Birchhanger, a village, I think, on the border of Essex and Hertfordshire, a hanger meant a very gentle slope down to a brook.
Oh, how lovely.
birch are birch trees.
Yes.
So when you came and saw that vista in front of you as you're travelling, probably between London and Cambridge.
There's a hangar with some birches. I must be in Birch Hangar.
Exactly.
Which is now, of course, famed for its motorway service station, Sue.
I've been there many times.
It is. I like that. So what is Downs a corruption of then?
Well, it's a corruption of the Old English word dune, D-U-N, and dune became hill.
And that is still in our language as a sand dune.
Exactly.
Well,
yes.
I never.
So, yes, absolutely. So they're all, over the thousands of years, as language has changed, accents have changed.
Be thousands on this. It'd just be a couple of thousand, I think, tops on this one. It was probably called a dun in Anglo-Saxon times, wasn't it? I'd have thought. Yes. But maps, didn't exist for the common person. No.
So the only way they knew where they were when they were travelling around was by topographically viewing the landscape. And that's how these names have come about and changed over time as well.
What are your qualifications? How do you know all this?
Well, about 30 years ago, I went to a summer school at Colchester University, a 6-week summer school, and it was all about English place names. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And I cannot quite remember the name of the tutor, but I think her name was Dr. Margaret Rule. Oh. And she published a book all about this. And it was just I found it fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating. I find it fascinating as well. I'd love to go to something like that. I mean, some of them are obvious, aren't they? Like Brent Ford, the ford over the River Brent. And Chiswick is quite interesting because Chiswick is Cheesewick. It was a town, little village on the side of the Thames, famous for its cheese. So Cheesewick, and wick is another little word for town or village, isn't it? A small village is a wick.
Well, I don't know about that because I remember being taught that wick may be an old name that the Romans had for a dairy farm.
Okay, well that fits with the cheese.
Yeah.
So it would just be the cheese farm then. It would be where you go to get your cheese. It's got nothing to do with villages. And they thought that the Romans may have crossed the Thames for the first time at Brentford and that it might have some link back to that, some sort of...
Yes.
I'm not faking it, Sue. When I tell you I'm interested in this stuff, I'm just proving...
So fords is also a Roman word for a very, for a brook.
Yes.
That runs across the road, and it can be flooded at times. So it's almost like a warning.
Yes, of course. Well, that is... Go on, carry on.
Bringing it forward, we've got Bridgetown in Barbados.
Yes.
And it's believed that the name came from Bristol.
Well, I never...
So originally it was Bristol, and eventually it became Bridgetown. And, of course, that's the connection with the transatlantic slave trade.
Whew, covered a lot of ground there, Sue.
So it's still happening today.
I love it. Round of applause for Sue in Bristol, which is where she called from, which is why it was such a lovely symmetry to the whole content of that call. 12:55 is the time, so we can cross off fans, we can cross off Downs. It's just chins and doves, is it? Chins and doves, doves and chins. No? All right. Should try and get Derek Griffiths on Full Disclosure. John's in East Horsley. John, question or answer?
Oh, I've got an answer for you, James.
Carry on, John.
Never, ever get over the information that is called in on these programmes. It's fascinating.
Isn't it?
So I've listened to it for a long time.
Thank you.
Rather a poignant reason for me ringing in. My lovely wife, Pam, died 7 years ago, sadly.
Sorry,
she didn't intend to. No. I'm sure you realise that. And my daughter and I gave her the most magnificent send-off.
Good.
Including the release of two white doves.
Oh.
And I said to the chap that brought them, where do they go? Because we released one each. Lauren, my daughter and I, we released one each.
Yes.
And they did a circuit of the crematorium in perfect, flight control.
Right.
And then headed off to where they came from, which was Essex.
Really?
And
so
the
they were
crematorium is in Leatherhead.
Doves. Yes.
And I said to him, well, what happens? He said, well, they're homing doves.
Well, I never.
So, I don't like to say my qualifications are being bereaved.
Well, they are, though. No, being curious.
Exactly.
And actually, now that you've said it, and I'm sure Glenn, who asked the question, would agree, it kind of had to be the answer, didn't it?
I guess so.
You can't.
And in fact, a friend of mine who's just
remember my wife's funeral as being spectacular. Only asked me yesterday where to get the doves. And I just recommended, well, not that I'm a dove expert, you understand.
Well, you are, but, you are now, John.
Of course, I can't wait for the ripple of applause.
You are now, and here it is.
Okay, mate.
I love that.
More power to your elbow. It's a fabulous programme. Thank you.
You're very kind. Take care, mate. Thank you.
Okay.
And what he said there about the amazing amounts of information you accrue is proved by India, who's just texted, because you'll remember that the what's the lovely lady who was telling us about the Anglo-Saxon place names? I didn't write down her name. Sue. She mentioned Margaret Rule as the person from whom she'd learned all about place names, and India's been in touch. I finally know why my university halls of residence were called Margaret Rule Hall at Portsmouth University. So it's just knowledge, man. The knowledge that unfolds during this hour is off the flipping charts. Matthew's in Croydon to wrap things up. Matthew, it's got to be doves, mate.
No, it's
chins, not doves. We've just done doves. It's got to be cheek and tell. It's nearly home time. It's chins. What? Quick, make it quick. Sheila's here.
I will. So the question asker was not far off with Tutankhamun. As far as I know it, the female pharaohs used to don a fake beard to appear more masculine and therefore more godlike.
Right.
And that became synonymous with a fib or a fake.
Really?
So people in that society used to stroke their chins when they were sceptical of what people were saying.
And now it's gone worldwide?
I believe so, yeah.
So that's a little bit iffy, that. What are your qualifications?
Well, I do have a fascination with ancient cultures. I'd like to say that it's something that I read or saw in a documentary, but I believe I heard it on 8 out of 10 Cats via the great Susie Dent.
Oh, you can't do that. You can't.
Can I not?
No, Susie Dent's like playing a joker, and it's a knockout. I can't argue with you now. You've said Susie Dent. That's it.
Well,
that's qualification.
That's what I believe. That's where I believe I heard it.
Well, that's fine. Then.
I may have heard it somewhere else.
No, you've heard it. You've said it now. That's it. That's completely kosher. A massive round of applause for Matthew, please, on that one. Cleared the board this week, which is nice. And I think the game goes to Sue, doesn't it? With the question about the Downs and the Duns, and she brought slavery into it, and Bristol and Chiswick, and you name it. It was all a Birchanger. Hey, so Mystery Hour ball game to Sue. If you think you should have won it, and that's fine, you can go and buy your own at mysteryhour.co.uk. That's it from me for another day. We'll be doing it again tomorrow morning from 10. Susie Dent's coming on Full Disclosure soon, actually. I've just remembered. If you missed any of today's show, you know what to do by now. Here's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.